Thank you. Uh, Before we start, as I have started tradition in Ways and Means, let's just pause for a moment of reflection. Let us think about the victims in Paris and San Bernardino and the communities of Plainfield and Danville today. Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot of information coming before us today, so we'll try and be orderly and timely. So the meeting is now officially called to order. We have the minutes of the last meeting were distributed. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes? It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. A proposed agenda has been distributed to all members and released to the public. Are there any amendments to the proposed agenda? Representative Gooden.
I would like to add an amendment to the agenda that basically states, it's very simple, that the state of Indiana does not release any funds to McGraw-Hill for payment on testing services until they fix the testing fiasco that has taken place. When I grew up, I was always told that you don't pay somebody until they do the job and they do it right, and that's when you pay them. And McGraw-Hill has obviously not done that. We saw the information that came to us the other day when they knew there was a mistake in the testing and the results, and they released them anyway. And to me, that is, there's no excuse for that at all. So I make the request that that's added to the agenda. No funds from the state of Indiana go to McGraw-Hill until that's fixed.
Senator Kinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Gooden, I guess, first off, I guess I would agree with you about the implications of their performance and the lack thereof. I got to sit on the committee, not this last summer, but it was the summer before when we had them in with the supposed explanation of their earlier failures. And I wasn't very enthused about what I heard. And the Department of Education is charged and has a contract with them, I think, is how this is set up. But I don't know that for certain. I think that's the way the protocol is. And so they have a primary responsibility to dig into this and try to get it corrected. And I had the good luck yesterday that I had a meeting with them about something else. So I talked to them about this, and they're digging into this. And I think we need to give them a chance to do their work. And it may be that it is appropriate for the budget agency and or the legislature to dig into this once we have some more information. The impression that I got from the meeting yesterday was that there wasn't any real verifiable failure of any significance yet, and so I think you might be premature on what you're saying. The prior experience tells me that there's probably some validity to what you're saying, and I'm probably reluctant to put it on the agenda when I'm not sure that I know what I'd be talking about this morning if it was on the agenda. But I think you raise a legitimate and a fair point that needs to be discussed, but I don't know that I can support your motion to put it on the agenda today. Representative Gooden. Yes. Right.
And I guess I am sympathetic to the issue, and also think that it ought to be reviewed. I guess the question is, I'd want to hear from the department, and I'm looking out here and I don't see any Department of Education officials here, and I would be reluctant to take such a strong position without the department weighing in. You know, they would have to execute this. They have to work with the contractor to do it. Do you want to withdraw the amendment? Do you want to have, that we'll contact Department of Education and have them give us some information as a budget committee, and that we take it up? We will have a budget committee sometime, either February or March, I anticipate, or early April. I don't know if we make it an agenda item then, but we need to have some communications with the department.
Out of respect for the chair, and then also I know the chair is always fair. So with that, I will withdraw the amendment, but I want to press very seriously, and I respectfully ask that maybe Brian or I'm sorry, Mr. Bailey, look into this. All right, Brian. So I would ask that we do that, and I think it would probably be appropriate for the Department of Education to come at some point, maybe not necessarily in a setting as this, but I think they need to come to individuals and say, hey, look, here's what we're doing. It may be confidential with their negotiations, so we don't need to let that part out. But at a
Correct.
certain point, I think the public needs to know as well, and I think that we need to push that pretty hard. So.
Right, and I think we need probably all our caucuses, legal counsel or attorney bubble, or bubble attorneys, whatever you want to call them, attorney bubbles, and the attorneys we have on budget committee, you know, because of the damage clause in the contracts and whether, you know, what legal remedies we do have, type of things.
I'll officially withdraw.
Okay, I appreciate that. Very important issue, though. Yeah, thank you. The agenda then is placed on the table for discussion at this time. Thank you. We're going to go right into the revenue forecast, and we have Mr. Newport, from IHS here to give us what the global, national, and local economy impacts Indiana. Appreciate it, Mr. Newport. And for us, we need to have the blue light on because that puts us out on the web so people can hear you. Is it blue? Okay.
Yes, great, thanks. First of all, let me give a little bit about my background. I'm from Louisiana, born in New Orleans, went to LSU, got my PhD from Harvard, and graduating in 1993, I worked for 2 years with the state of Washington's Department of Revenue, and then 3 years with their Economic and Forecast Council. And for the last 18 years, I've been working for a company that's now called IHS. Previously, it was called DRI, which is then owned by McGraw-Hill, then later called DRI WIFA. And in 2009, a company called IHS purchased us, and so we're now IHS. And I've been working for the U.S. Macroeconomic Service. I cover the United States economy. We do a monthly forecast. I'm not the economist who does the Indiana forecast, so I'm presenting the forecast on his behalf. This first slide gives a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. The highlight is that GDP growth will pick up from 2.5% growth in 2005 to 2.7% growth in 2016. The 2015 number is almost set in stone because we have 3 quarters of data, and we have most of the data for the 4th quarter already in. So it'll be somewhere between 2.4 to 5%. The key is that consumer spending will be the backbone of the of growth going forward. The drivers that will pick us up from 2.5 to 7% growth are housing, business investment, and the fiscal stimulus bill that was fiscal stimulus based on a bill that was passed a couple of months ago. And finally, that interest rates, our forecast is very similar to the Fed's forecast. They're forecasting 4 Fed hikes in 2016 and then 4 more in 2017. So gradual increases in interest rates through 2018. So what I'd like to do is begin talking about the state of the economy today, where we are today, and then delve into the forecast. So we are now in the 80th month of this expansion. This is the 12th expansion since 1945 and the fourth longest on record. The longest expansion lasted exactly 10 years and ended with a recession of 2001. Expansions on average last about 5 years. So this one is 6.5 years old. The fact that this expansion has lasted longer than average doesn't mean that one is overdue. Right now, there are not a lot of imbalances building up that we should worry about. So that's good reason to discount the recession warnings that we're hearing more about today. The economy grew at a 2.1% annual rate in the third quarter, which matches the 2.1% annual average of the last 5 years, a growth rate that most economists would agree has been slightly disappointing in the sense that it has taken us nearly 7 years to get back to full employment. Generally, it takes less than 2 years to get back to full employment following a recession. Inflation is running very low. Year-over-year consumer price inflation in November was just 0.5%. Core inflation, which is a measure that strips out food and energy, is running at a 1.3% year-on-year rate, which is considerably below the Fed's target of 2.0%. Auto sales are soaring. Sales in November exceeded the 18 million mark selling rate for the third straight month, and this has never happened before. Housing starts, on the other hand, remain low, and new home sales and single-family housing starts and permits remain at depressed levels. So this year, we're seeing a big divergence between the manufacturing sector, which has been moving sideways because of the strong dollar and because of an ongoing inventory correction, and the broader economy, which is largely being driven by consumer spending and for the most part is doing fairly well. We are seeing also a divergence between the oil patch states, which are struggling because of low oil prices, and the other states which are benefiting because of the low oil and gasoline prices. The U.S. economy is proving to be a resilient economy. Again, it continues to create jobs at a healthy clip despite tens of thousands of jobs lost in the oil patch states and despite a sharp appreciation of the dollar that has brought the manufacturing sector to a standstill. The economy is suffering from one serious fundamental malady, which is slow labor productivity growth. Productivity growth, which is something we don't hear about much, is probably the most important statistic of all. Productivity has slowed sharply, and we're not really sure why. Still, despite the sharp slowdown in productivity, and despite the disappointing pace of growth of recent years, our economy is the one that nearly every other country in the world envies because we're doing much better than just about anyone else. So if you grade on a curve, the United States economy gets an A. So let me proceed by discussing the indicators that I look at in assessing the state of the economy and then switch over to discussing the forecast. So the first chart shows payroll employment growth at an all-time high. We lost 8.7 million jobs between February 2008 and March 2010, and it took 50 months to get those jobs back. Since March 2010, the economy has created 13 million jobs. So far this year, payroll employment has increased by 210,000 a month, which is below last year's pace of 253,000, but it's still an impressive number. And this year, we're on pace to add about 2.62526 million jobs. The key driver of economic activity in just about any state is the state of the U.S. economy. If you plot the payroll growth numbers year over year, as I've done here for the United States against Indiana or against just about any other state, they tend to line out really well most of the time. And the same is the case if you plot the unemployment rate on the same graph. The question is why do they line up so closely? And the answer is that we share many of the key drivers, and our economies are closely integrated. For example, we share the same interest rates, the same exchange rates, many of the same prices. When oil prices go up, they go up everywhere and by the same amount. Our federal income and corporate tax rates are the same everywhere, and our monetary policies are the same. Still, sometimes these graphs, these chart lines will deviate from one another for periods of time. And if one state performs better than another over a period of time, it's usually because it usually depends on goods that it produces that it sells outside the state, that is on its exports. So this could include high-tech jobs, manufacturing, farming, or higher education. If these sectors are doing better than the national average, job growth in the state will generally do better than the national average. But the key point is that by far the key driver of economic activity in Indiana and just about every other state is the state of the United States economy.
Mr. Newport, Senator Kenley has a question.
Welcome to Indiana. Did you say you work for the state of Washington?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Did you work with Russ Brubaker out there?
I rode the shuttle with Russ for about a year, yes.
Oh, good. I have a theory that the reason why the U.S. economy has been holding itself in a better position than other economies the last few years has to do with the fact that we're basically exporting the American culture to other places around the world that want to come out of being a third world country or behind. And so the U.S. economy, particularly led by things like the technology industry and even the pharma industry to some extent and some others, so that is kind of what business that we are in today. And I was hesitating as to whether to ask this question now or sort of later when you got done, but I think what you're going to do is start big and drill down to Indiana. So when we look at this jobs graph that you have here on the second or third page, which has the comparison of the U.S. and Indiana, we see that when the U.S. economy dips, Indiana seems to dip a little harder, starting back at 2000.
Right, yep.
And so I wonder, from a policymaker's perspective, if that means that, if my premise is correct, that Indiana is busy exporting its successes to other countries, and that's actually our best product. If that means that Indiana needs to continue to sharpen itself in determining what its strengths are that are exportable in that way. And I know that's kind of a big out there question, but surely you all think about those kind of things sometimes. So can you validate what I'm saying as the premise? And then can you comment on whether Indiana policymakers should be focusing on the types of industries that they're trying to strengthen in the state of Indiana?
Right. I think that one reason that some countries have done very well since the Great Recession up until now was because of the exports, the knowledge that we exported to countries such as China and the emerging countries. For India, I think I'm not totally familiar with Indiana's economy because I cover the national economy, but my sense is that manufacturing would probably explain why the dip in the Great Recession was a lot greater, because manufacturing was really hammered worse than the rest of the economy.
You just think that our strength in manufacturing might be, it's a more cyclical type of thing, and so it accentuates our position when you have a recession?
I think that's the case in 2009. I don't know about other, manufacturing does tend to be more cyclical than other sectors. As far as policy recommendations, I couldn't say. Just looking at these numbers, I'm seeing that Indiana is probably performing a little bit worse than the national average recently, but that's something that is true for most of the states in the Midwest and in the Northeast. We're seeing more job growth in the South and in the West, and the reasons for that, there's several reasons for that. Part of it has to do with the cost of business is lower in the South. That we're seeing a migration away from the coal states from to the warmer states, and part of that is related to the demographics, the fact that the baby boomers, that if you're a baby boomer, you don't want to be shoveling snow when you're past 65, and so you move towards warmer, and so that I think is largely the reason why we're seeing why Indiana and most of the states of the Midwest will not see job growth as the job growth will be slightly slower than the national average.
Okay, well, it's pretty common theory to attribute it to the weather, but I'm not sure that I'm buying that in the long run. I think we need to figure out, maybe this is a question for us to focus on, but I was trying to get an outside perspective here.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Newport, Senator Talion also has a question.
Very quickly, can you explain the heading on this, payroll, employment growth? Are we talking about number of jobs, or are we talking
This is a
about
percentage.
wages?
These are year-over-year growth rates.
Of
the percentage.
job numbers or wages?
Payroll employment numbers. These are the numbers that every month the BLS puts out. It's the most important.
Is this withholdings?
No, these are payroll employment numbers.
That's what I'm asking. Payroll employment, what does that mean?
Those
Are
are,
we talking about number of jobs, or are we talking about wages?
it's the number of jobs, the number of jobs
Okay, thank
that are
you.
created. Yeah. So this slide shows the 12-month payroll gains for Indiana and the United States. So 2.6 million additional jobs were created in the United States in the 12 months ending in October, which is slightly less than 2014, but still the second best since the year 2000. For Indiana, 60,600 new jobs were created in the 12 months ending in October, and these are the best job numbers since 1998. So the economy is, the unemployment rate has dropped to 5%. At its height in October 2009, it stood at 10%, so we're closing in on full employment. The question is, what is full employment? And we're not really sure. It's basically refers to equilibrium in the labor market, but it's a number probably somewhere between 4.5% and 5%. These are the labor force participation rates for those between the ages of 16 and 65. These numbers have fallen to their lowest level since 1978. The labor force participation rate for men is at an all-time low. So the question is, why is that? And part of it is the demographics, the aging of the baby boomers, but part of it is that many of those who lost their jobs during the Great Recession were never able to get back on their feet and have dropped out of the labor force. So what are these people doing? I'm not really sure. Some are on disability insurance, some may be incarcerated, some may be working in the underground economy, perhaps selling over the internet, and of course, some may be doing nothing at all. They're being supported by family members. So even though we're seeing vast improvements in the labor market, there are pockets up there that still have not mended. This is wage inflation, and this is why the Fed wavered on raising interest rates. The thinking at the Fed is that wage inflation and inflation generally today are being held down by temporary factors, that is the strong dollar and low oil and commodity prices, and the prices will go up in the medium term, 2016 and 2017, once the effects of the strong dollar and low oil prices dissipate. But there's not unanimity about this view. There are an influential group of economists led by Larry Summers who believe that the reason that growth is sluggish and the reason wage growth is sluggish and the reason it has taken so long to recover from the Great Recession is that the economy suffers from a malady that called secular stagnation, which is something that Japan suffers from. We're incapable of generating enough demand to raise the price level, and this is the reason that Summers and some economists say was reason enough not to raise interest rates. For reasons we don't fully understand, productivity growth has slowed sharply. Now, there's a saying among macroeconomists that productivity isn't everything, and many people don't even know what productivity is, but in the long run, to economists, it is just about everything because it measures our capacity to raise living standards over time. Productivity growth started to slow in 2010, and the slowdown has been more pronounced over the last 4 or 5 years. In the last 4 years, productivity growth has averaged only 0.4%. Since 1947, its average has been 2.1%. So if we apply the rule of 72, which is the rule that tells us how fast something growing will double, if productivity growth is 2%, living standards will double every 36 years. But if productivity growth is only 0.5%, living standards will double every 144 years. So there are two main theories about what's going on. One of them is that the innovations that we're seeing today are just not as path-breaking as innovations in the past. So as impressive as the iPhone is, as Google's search engine is, drones, driverless cars, the contributions that these make to the workplace pale in comparison to innovations such as the internal combustion engine, electric power, the interstate highway system, and the airplane. The second theory about productivity is that we're just not doing a very good job in measuring it. So how do you measure the value of Google's search engine? How do you measure the value of a drug that cures most cases of hepatitis C? How do you measure the recent declines in infant mortality rates? These have been declining since 2004, and in 2014, they reached an all-time low in the United States. And so I think the truth about productivity is somewhere in the middle, but I lean towards the view that we have a measurement problem and not a productivity problem. So this chart shows you where the jobs are being created. They're mostly being created in the services sector, and the mining sector is losing jobs, and we're not seeing much job growth in government, manufacturing, or education. So the dollar, this is the two measures of the dollar that the Fed puts out, and it also puts out an aggregate index. The aggregate number, the total trade-weighted dollar, which is a weighted average of 23 currencies, weighted according to how much a country trades with the United States, is up 15% since July 2014. And the dollar has gained strength against all 23 currencies. The dollar is 11% stronger against the euro, 7% stronger against the yen, and 4% stronger against the Chinese renminbi than it was a year ago. So the story about the dollar and the impact that it is having on the U.S. economy can get complicated very easily, but it really boils down to two things, or to two regions of the world, the Eurozone and China and its trading partners. The Eurozone and China are struggling now. They're not in recession, and they're not heading into the recession, but they're just not performing very well right now. For example, in 2010, the unemployment rate in the Eurozone was 10%, and the unemployment rate in the United States was also 10%. Today, the unemployment rate in the Eurozone is still 10%, while the U.S. unemployment rate has dropped to 5%. So because the Eurozone continues to underperform, and because it will have to follow easier monetary policies than the United States over the next 2 years, the dollar has strengthened against the euro. For China, it's a case of China growing at astronomical rates for 2 decades. But the policies that drove growth over that period, overinvestment and underconsumption, were unsustainable. And so China's shifting its economy away from investment towards consumption. But right now, it's also being hit by 3 bubbles that are losing air: a property bubble, a stock market bubble, and a private debt bubble. But let me emphasize that China's economy is not collapsing. It's just slowing down, growing from 9% to 6%. So dollar has positive and negative effects. The good thing about having a strong dollar is that everything that you buy abroad is cheaper. But the bad thing about having a bad dollar, about a strong dollar, is that if you are exposed to foreign competition, it's bad for business. And in the United States, it's the manufacturing companies that are most exposed to foreign competition. And so that is the sector that is hurting. But let me stress one point, which is that manufacturing is not contracting, it is at a standstill, and not all manufacturing is hurting, only those sectors that are exposed to foreign competition. Some sectors, such as autos and non-metallic minerals, which is benefiting from the construction sector doing well, are doing well. Some sectors, especially those exposed to foreign competition, such as primary metals and machinery, are hurting, but most sectors in manufacturing are moving sideways at what my colleagues calls a tortuous pace. So this is the forecast for our industrial industrial production. In addition to the slowdown to the drag from the slow dollar, manufacturing is also being hit this year by an inventory correction. What happened was that, and I think it's related to the strong dollar, is that the dollar got stronger, stuff came into the U.S. economy, and that stuff went into inventories in the first half of 2015. About 2% of GDP went into inventories. So this means that the economy, for a period of time, has to grow slower for the economy to get rid of to get these inventories back in line. We expect about a small part of the correction has already taken place, maybe about 0.6% took place in the third quarter. We're expecting inventories to cut growth by about 1.1% in the fourth quarter, and we expect another half correction in the first half of 2016. I prefer to gauge a sector's health by looking at how much it contributes to GDP growth instead of looking at its growth rate. And that's because growth rates are influenced by the level of spending. If spending levels are depressed, any positive change registers as a large percentage increase. So this slide tells us that consumer spending is the biggest contributor to growth. It also tells us that consumer spending is a stable contributor. It tells us that imports will be a significant drag on growth through 2018, and that inventories will be a small drag on growth next year. And this is our forecast from 2015 through 2017. And again, the numbers for 2015, we have these numbers aren't going to move around all that much. The first number I want you to focus on are the consumer spending numbers. Those numbers are 3.1%, 3.2%. It's a stable contributor to GDP. It's a reliable contributor because the increases in consumer spending that we are expecting in the forecast will mostly be financed by gains in personal income, not by debt. The second thing to note that I want to highlight is the gain in growth between 2015 and 2017 from 2.5% to 3.1%. What is it that gets us growing faster from 2.5 to 3% that gets us from almost full employment to full employment? And it mainly consists of three things, maybe four things. One of them is a small pickup in residential investment related to the steady pickup in housing starts that we've been seeing for the last several years. Slow, steady improvements in housing starts. Second is a pickup in business investment spending. Business investment spending is low this year because particular sectors of the economy have slashed spending a lot. Most companies are spending at normal rates. And the third thing is the fiscal stimulus, which we expect to add maybe about 0.2% the growth in 2016 and another 0.1% the growth in 2017. Exports are another driver for growth in 2016 and 2017, and exports pick up because the drag from the dollar starts to dissipate. And in addition to that, we're expecting the dollar to start losing value sometime starting in 2016. This chart, what we see is as the economy hits full employment, employment gains settle down at about 2.5 million through 2018. But if you go in the outer years, they slow down considerably. They slow down considerably because of demographics. And these are the other key indicators: industrial production or which is mostly manufacturing, but it's also utilities and mining. Industrial production slowing in 2015 and 2016 because of the dollar and the inventory correction. Payroll employment, respectable numbers, 1.6, 1.3. But light vehicle sales, we're expecting levels right now are very high, and our auto analysts don't expect them to come down. In fact, they're expecting the 2017 numbers are higher than those this year and in 2016. Housing starts, again, steady improvement in housing starts, but we don't see the housing market coming back at producing housing starts at normal rates until somewhere around 2018. Consumer prices coming up. This is a CPI to 2.8% in 2017. Core CPI climbing up to 2.1%. This is a core CPI, not the number that the Fed looks at. The number that the Fed looks at generally runs about 0.2, 0.3% lower than CPI. We don't think that the Fed is going to be able to achieve its inflation target until sometime in 2020. Oil prices, these are very hard to forecast. Admittedly, our oil forecast has moved all over the place. It's very difficult to forecast, but our forecast has prices where they are in 2016. And then starting to climb back in 2017 as world growth starts picking up. The federal funds rate starting gradually rising in four increases in 2016 and 4 in 2017, and the 10-year Treasury bill rising along with the federal funds rate. So the Fed, as many of you know, raised the federal funds rate yesterday by 25 basis points. The decision was unanimous. It was the first rate hike in more than 9 years. Rates had been zero for 7 years. The so-called dot plot, which is the expectations of Federal Reserve officials regarding future interest rate hikes, suggests that there will be 4 rate hikes in 2016. The Fed also announced that it will continue to reinvest the principal amounts and maturing agency debt and Treasury debt, and expects to do this for a while. In other words, its balance sheet, which is now over $4.5 trillion, the Fed says we're not going to start bringing it down for now. And this rate hike was far from a slam dunk. Some smart economists, such as Larry Summers and Paul Krugman, and economists at the IMF, and many other economists, believe that the Fed acted too soon. And this is our forecast for job growth through 2018. If I extend this through the year 2025, we are going to see slowdowns in payroll growth. It's going to happen nationally. It's going to happen in Indiana, and it's related to the demographics. So today we're creating 200,000 jobs a year. In 2021, that number is going to be about 100,000. And in the year 2025, it's going to be about 50,000. This was the inventory correction that I was referring to earlier. It's about 2% of GDP. We've worked up about a third of it. Much of it is being worked off in this quarter, and the rest will be worked off in 2016. And this is our forecast for industrial construction, industrial production. And again, so we see a slowdown in a slowdown in manufacturing in 2015 and 2016, but then a pickup in 2017. But the numbers are not all bad. Autos will do well, but machinery and textiles will not do so well. Chemicals are expected to grow 3.4 this year, and then 2.1 next year, and then pick up to 4.2 in 2017. This is our forecast for consumer price inflation. We're expecting it to pick up, but we're not expecting, as I said earlier, we're not expecting the Fed to realize its inflation target until somewhere after 2020. This is our forecast for wage growth, some acceleration in wage growth, but again, not a substantial pickup. This is the backbone of our forecast, the forecast for consumer spending. Again, very boring, 3.2%. But if you look at the second row, the spending increases are based on increases in disposable income. Disposable income and real consumption grow at the same rate in 2016 and 2017. So consumers don't take on more debt. They don't finance their spending by borrowing. They finance it through their income. Real household wealth continues to grow. Light vehicle sales, as I said earlier, remain at very high levels, and home sales continue to pick up. This is our forecast for oil prices. The more relevant one is the real numbers, the inflation adjusted one, and that picks up. The assumption is that as world growth picks up, oil prices will start picking up. They're very hard to forecast in the long run. What determines the price of oil, and basically it's a trade-off between technology and the fact that it costs you more to take oil out of the ground as you pump more of it out. So far, oil prices have been coming down because we're producing a lot because of technological advances. If those technological advances slow down, prices are going to shoot up. If they don't slow down, then we may see prices stabilizing at under $100 in real terms. And again, this chart shows the relationship between spending and disposable income. Again, spending is driven by changes in disposable income. This is a chart, net worth. Consumer net worth, which is the middle line, reached an all-time high in the second quarter. It was down slightly in the third quarter because of declines, because of the decline in the stock market. But generally, consumers are better off. They're better off today. Their wealth is higher than it ever has been. Our forecast for light vehicle sales, they're going to remain at very high levels through 2020. So let me just briefly talk about housing and investment, and then I'll start. I'll talk about go into Indiana's forecast for Indiana. Residential investment has been making contributions to GDP growth of between 0.2 to 0.3% over the last 6 quarters, and we believe that it will make contributions to growth that are 0.1% higher over the next 8 quarters of 0.3 to 0.4%. That's not a lot, but it helps. And the source of that added strength will be the release of pent-up demand from young adults between the ages of 20 and 35 who are currently doubling up by either living with their parents or relatives or with more roommates that they would care to have. To give you an example, my daughter just graduated from college, and she's now living with us. She's going to stay with us for about a year or two. She's working at a bakery, saving money, preparing to go to graduate school. And I think that is happening a lot more than it did before the recession. And because that is happening a lot, that explains in part the slow recovery in the housing market. But my daughter's not going to be with us till she's running in her 40s. She's going to eventually, these young adults are going to move out. And when that happens, we should see a pickup in housing construction. And in fact, that is also part of the pickup in housing construction for the state of Indiana. But generally, the housing market is in as good a shape as it has been since the Great Recession. Credit availability is improving for both buyers and buildings, at builders. Supplies are tight, but not exceedingly tight, which is why home prices are going up in the 5% range. Not too hot, not too cold. The multifamily sector is back to normal. It's a single-family sector that continues to disappoint. Levels remain at depressed levels by historical standards, but still, this sector is improving, and that is what matters for GDP growth. So let me briefly talk about investment. Business investment has slowed recently. Most companies continue to invest at steady rates. However, companies exposed to foreign competition, which are mainly in manufacturing, low oil and gas prices, and falling agriculture prices, have cut capital spending sharply, and that is why the top line investment numbers have been weak this year. For example, agricultural machinery is down 48% year over year due to falling agricultural prices. Railroad equipment is down 56% because of low oil prices. Special industrial machinery is down 20% because of the slowdown in the capital-intensive manufacturing sector, and metal and mine structures are down 44%. So with oil prices no longer falling, and the dollar is stabilizing, and then starting to lose ground next year, the forces that have weakened capital spending are nearly behind us, and for that reason, we're expecting spending on equipment to pick up as companies invest at rates consistent with an economy growing at a 2.7%, 2.5, 2.7 to 3.0% rate. So again, the pickup in the economy that we're seeing, that we're expecting, is coming from housing, from investment, and from government spending. Structures, this is non-residential construction, spending on structures. This has been making broad-based gains, but the recent gains have been smaller than those that we've seen in the recent past because of a slowdown and a projection correction in manufacturing construction. Manufacturing construction is surging. It climbed by $42 billion in the past 18 months during a period when the sector had slowed to a standstill. The additional spending in manufacturing construction is mostly chemicals, and as best as I can tell, it's mostly spending on chemical manufacturing plants in Texas and in Louisiana. It's a surge that's unsustainable, so in our forecast, we have manufacturing construction and dropping in the fourth quarter, starting in the fourth quarter of 2016. This chart right here shows the contributions to growth coming from oil rigs. And again, this is another reason we expect an acceleration of growth. The collapse in drilling has been a drag on growth. The drag goes away. With the drag going away, that will be a plus for GDP growth. This is our forecast for construction by sector. And again, we're seeing across in the United States and across in many of the cities that I'm visiting, what I'm seeing is a lot more cranes in the skyline than I saw 3 or 4 years ago. The only category that is hurting right now is mines and wells, and the category that we're expecting to topple will be manufacturing construction because of these surging numbers in 2014 and 2016. I'm not going to talk much about this budget bill that was passed 2 months ago, other than to make 2 key points, and one of them is that it will be a plus for growth in 2016 and 2017. And the other is that the main importance of the bill is it just adds clarity to the fiscal policy. It just gets this cloud of uncertainty about government shutdowns, and just eliminating that uncertainty is something that is good for business and a positive for the economy. This is our forecast for the deficit. The deficit will remain more or less where it is going forward. And this is basically the same thing. The gap between expenditures and revenues, we're not forecasting a grand bargain whereby the Democrats and the Republicans agree on a bill where taxes are increased and spending is reduced. At one time, we had expected that to happen, but it's no longer in our forecast. Again, the fourth source of the pickup in growth is a pickup in exports. The world economy remains in low gear. We're expecting a modest pickup in growth in 2016 and then a larger pickup in 2017. The Eurozone will improve slightly because aided by monetary stimulus and the currency depreciation. China's growth will slow further in 2016, and countries that export, commodity exporting countries in America, Africa, and Asia will continue to hurt. The countries that will achieve the fastest growth in GDP will be Asia Pacific, excluding Japan. This is our forecast for so anyway, the bottom line again for the forecast is that it's based on consumer spending, and that the spending increases are supported by gains in employment, disposable income, and household net worth, not debt. That we're going to see an acceleration. It's not a big acceleration from 2.5 to 3.0. And in the outer years, it starts to slow down. But that acceleration comes from four places. It comes from residential investment, from foreign trade, from business fixed investment, and from the fiscal stimulus. We expect the Fed, I wrote this bullet 2 days ago. Our forecast is that the Fed funds rate will reach an equilibrium of 3.25% in 2018, and that core inflation will gradually hit its target somewhere after 2020. The forecasts are weighted slightly to the downside because of the weakness that we're seeing in the global economy. So, for Indiana's forecast, it all starts with the United States. So we expect the United States to do a little better in 2016 than in 2015 and better in 2017. The stall in manufacturing, we're expecting that stall to continue into the first half of 2016, and then things slowly improve. Companies that are exposed to foreign competition or that service oil patch states will do poorly. Most manufacturing will continue to move sideways through the middle of 2016 because of the ongoing inventory correction. The auto sector is expected to do well. Manufacturing sectors that are expected to have negative growth rates in 2016 include textiles, apparel, primary metals, fabricated metals, machinery, and heavy-duty trucks. On the other hand, logging, furniture, and non-metallic mineral products should do okay because of the ongoing recovery in housing, and chemicals is expected to slow in 2015 to about 2% from 3.4% in 2015. So this is our regional outlook. The states in the West and the Sun Belt will grow the fastest. And again, much of that is related to the migration. And as I said earlier, part of it is the demographics. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the cost of doing business is a lot lower in the South than it is in other places. And manufacturing gains, especially from the auto sector, have been the key to improving the Midwestern economy, but that sector is not going to do very well, at least for the first half of 2016, and then things gradually improve. The sector that will be hurt the hardest are those in the oil patch states. Demand for steel pipe, machinery, transportation, and construction will hurt manufacturing sectors. And again, this is where job growth will be concentrated in the West and in the Southwest. And again, well, and again, employment growth, not much variation in employment growth because we're not expecting much variation in national employment growth. A slowdown in employment growth through 2019, but much of that is related, part of it is related to demographics and part of it is related to the fact that jobs are just migrating to the southern and western states. Wage growth lagged the nation in 2015, but I would take those numbers with a grain of salt because those numbers, the initial numbers are subject to data revisions, sometimes to large data revisions. So I would hesitate to try to make much of the fact that wage growth in early 2015 has been slower than the national average because data revisions may eventually wipe that away, or the data revisions will eventually tell a more accurate story. Housing starts pick up in 2016, the same reason that they're picking up nationally, mostly related to a pickup in household formation. But in addition to that, builders are in better shape. Builders have been slow to ramp up on housing starts because credit to them has been tight because developers have been reluctant to develop lots because credit to developers has been very tight. But that started to loosen up in 2015. So housing starts, single-family housing starts in particular, should start picking up. Farm income varies along with farm income in the United States. And again, population growth will continue to move to the southwest. In the northeast, we're actually seeing population losses in Rhode Island, Vermont, and Maine. These are three states. These are three, at least Maine and all three states are wonderful states and wonderful to live in, but people are leaving those states. And I think part of it is weather, but it's also the fact that people are getting older, and when they get older, they don't want to spend the rest of their life shoveling snow. They'd rather move to Florida or Arizona. So this is our forecast for Indiana employment growth. Close from 2.2 to 1.5 to 1.2, but these are good numbers. The unemployment rate falling to 4.5% below the national average. Personal income, steady personal income gains, spending supported by consumer spending, housing starts contributing to improve, and the share and the single family share starting to take, single family starting to grow relative to the multifamily. This is our track record. And again, I don't do this forecast, but my colleague Tom Jackson does. But I think Tom is a very good guy. I assume it's a good track record. So this is the bottom line for the Indiana economy. Near-term economic growth will continue to be favorable. Manufacturing, especially in the transportation sector, has spurred the recovery over the past 5 years. It's a big piece. Its share is much larger than it is nationally. Sales of cars and light trucks are a huge factor, but demand from the oil and gas industry for steel pipe machinery has helped, but that's going to hurt going forward. And again, as it is nationally, it's the service sector. It's where the jobs are going to be moving to. High tech also. And the long-term population growth will be a drag on the economy. So I'm happy to entertain questions if you have.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of information. You made the statement in the beginning that there's not a lot of imbalances that you look at that you think things are going to be pretty steady. Is there any sector or any indicator that would be an imbalance that would make you key or signal that the forecast is changing?
Well, I think there are two sectors right now that we're hearing a lot about. One of them is junk bonds. I don't think that's um, that's a big problem. It's mostly a matter of money changing hands. People who have their money invested in hedge funds that own a lot of junk bonds are going to take a hit. The other imbalance is one that is in the non-residential, the commercial real estate prices, because those have really taken off the last 3 or 4 years. It's like the housing prices, they went like this, and then they just shot up. Prices for commercial real estate have shot up a lot more. That sector is always vulnerable to a recession, but it's one sector where the increases in prices are probably being financed by easy credit. So if we were to fall into a recession, that's one sector that would take a hit. Now it did take a hit in the 2009 recession, but it did not have nearly as much of an impact as housing did, because what banks did when those loans went bad was they merely held on to the loans. They didn't force the owners into bankruptcy. And then as the economy recovered, the prices went up, and so they weren't forced to foreclose on a lot of those loans. They decided instead to hold on to those loans, wait for prices to catch up, and that happened. So those are the two sectors. The imbalance that we're worried most about is world growth, but that is something that tends to happen in slow motion. When the dollar gets stronger, it impacts the economy over a 3-year period. So it's slowly happened. So that's something it's something that would probably slow the economy down, but not cause a huge dent in growth. So to answer your question again, the junk bonds and commercial real estate prices.
You touched on one of the things I was thinking about because of government policy and indebtedness, concerns about Puerto Rico, whether they can make their debt payment and what that ripple effect is, and maybe other foreign governments that also have problems. As rising interest rates happen, and under general accounting principles, won't that make state and local municipalities' balance sheets worse? And there would be pressure on governments to increase their revenue stream to accommodate those balance sheets?
Yeah, that's something to worry about, but the interest rates are going up slowly. So we're going to see 25% increments. So they'll go up 1% next year, and then another 1% the next year. And long-term rates may or may not go up because the Fed doesn't have a lot of control over long-term rates. And in the early 2000s, it had no control at all. It would raise the federal funds rate, and the long-term rate would stay down. So the long-term rates may not go up, or at least we're not forecasting them to go up all that much. They may not go up all that much because they are largely because they are very much affected by the demand, by what's happening to the dollar, by the demand, by the fact that foreigners, when things go bad abroad, they ship them the dollars, and that brings long-term interest rates in the United States down. So we may see long-term rates not go up not all that much while the federal funds rate goes up. So I guess the brief answer to your question is that we're not too concerned about it because we're expecting interest rates to rise slowly.
Would the federal government, if they had to increase 1% in their borrowing interest payment, wouldn't it be over $1 trillion?
I couldn't give you a number. It would probably be it would be a large number. Right now, they're borrowing at very low rates. So yes, they would be borrowing at higher rates, and that would add to the deficit. Yes.
Senator Kenley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of the information that you contain in there, we've seen every time for about the last 10 years, which is everybody's moving to the South and the West, and therefore they have stronger economies. And so we've been in a sort of a moderate growth pattern now for what, 70 months?
Yeah, yes.
So, and then you and I had a little exchange earlier about how Indiana's heavy on the manufacturing thing, and manufacturing tends to be a little more cyclical than other types of industries. And so Indiana may be a little more susceptible to a slowdown in manufacturing or something like that. And I'm having a hard time kind of following the conclusions that just kind of indicate a very similar pattern to the prior 70 months in your revenue forecast for now. It seems like all you're saying is we can't see anything that tells us that there's going to be a change, and yet historically, and when you look at the manufacturing impact here in Indiana, it seems like a little deeper dive into the analysis might be in order here to talk about where we're going to be. I just can't quite figure out why there's well, this is the status quo. It's been here for 70 months. We don't see any reason for it to change.
Right. I think they're just not a lot of imbalances out there. The U.S. economy, it's normal for the U.S. economy to grow. What's not normal is for the U.S. economy to go into recession. We go into recession it's been every 6 years, but it's really been, the stretches have been longer and longer recently. So the norm is for the economy to grow.
So do you think that that is a reflection that we have a government-managed economy as opposed to one that's behaving independently of itself? I mean, I'm trying to find a reason for that.
Well, I think it's because our economy is not as regulated as other economies. I think our economy is more dynamic. It's driven more by free enterprise than other economies, and it's largely, I think that is largely, in my opinion, it's the reason that we are doing better.
I think the reason I'm asking these questions is there are two reasons. Number one, I'm trying to figure out why I think I should remain as confident as you are that everything's just going to keep going. And then the second reason why I'm asking the question is the relationship, which maybe needs to be discussed in a different forum of between you and the state as to what the value added is of the forecast at this point in time. So that's probably another time for that discussion. So
Yeah, this is our baseline forecast, and our baseline, we always put probabilities to it. The probability that we put for this forecast is 80%. We also have a pessimistic forecast. Recessions are impossible to forecast. No one has been able to do that correctly, but they happen periodically. So
people do it every day on the market.
And so in any given year, there's maybe 15 to 20% chance that the economy could fall into recession, and I think that is something that you should always keep in the back of your mind. But right now, the economy, there's not a lot out there that makes us that we're worried about, that we think.
Senator Talion.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, if you can make some comments on this. I see that your indicators show that over the past and continuing that we've got some growth in real personal income. But one of the things that we have been looking at here is trying to figure out why we continue to have a decrease in our sales tax income. And I know it can't be all due to lower gasoline prices. Do you have any comments about why our income's going up, but spending at least, isn't translating into sales tax?
I don't. I just don't know much about Indiana, about your revenue, how your sales tax revenue. I just don't know enough to answer that question.
Let me ask you.
Senator Kinley, does he want to?
I don't want to break in on that, but I've been involved in this streamlined sales tax discussion about collecting internet sales tax for years. And we've even had studies here within the state of Indiana when we were dealing with Amazon about how much are we missing out there? And we had somebody in the administration, not the current administration, had done a study and it said your loss is like 60 to 80 million dollars. And I think, I'll just step up and say, I think that our loss is probably closer to 400 million a year than it is 60 to 80. And
Wow.
I think we're just, I don't know why we won't take the blinders off and deal with that issue.
All right, so one more question. Um, We keep seeing that the unemployment rate is going down and that we've got more jobs going on.
Yep.
But when we legislators go out to the field and ask our constituents, what is the most important thing going on right now? What's your biggest concern? The response still, and for the past several years, is always jobs.
Right.
So is there some way that we can get a handle on a real unemployment number that includes that sort of participation rate, that low participation rate? How do we go about finding that information?
Well, I don't know if it's done at the state level, but at the national level, there are 6 measures of unemployment that the BLS puts out every month, U1 to U6. And the U6 one is one that looks both of the unemployed, but it also measures people, it includes as unemployed people who have dropped out of the labor force, as well as people who are working part-time, but we would prefer to work full-time. And that's the category that is still, the group of people that their situation never got better as the rest of the economy improved. So I don't know if that number is produced at the state level. It is at the national level.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, is there a correlation between jobs lost, salary-wise or earnings-wise, versus jobs created, earnings-wise? I know a couple of years ago, we were looking at the demographic information that Indiana was losing jobs that paid $40 an hour, and we're creating, it takes 4 jobs at $10 an hour to reach that plateau of the $40 an hour salary or earnings that individual is making. So is there a direct correlation or relationship between the jobs that are being lost at a higher income level as the ones being created at a lower income level?
You know, I just don't know enough about that, but part of the reason that you may see that is because you do see some, not a lot, but you do see some job migration to the south where the jobs are cheaper, where the costs are cheaper, and so the high-paying jobs, well, it could be related to that, but I just don't know enough to answer that.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, also, I'd like for Senator Kenley, if he would, I know he's been working on issues, and worked some with him as well on the streamline issue with the feds and collecting this internet tax. I was looking at some research the other day, and it said that now over 50% of Christmas shoppers bought at least one item online. And a lot of those folks, they said 30% did all of their shopping online. So we are losing out on that revenue. And I know we've had bills that we've introduced in the past in the legislature trying to collect that, and I just know there's a relationship at the federal level with the state level, and I know there's some states that haven't jumped on board yet for whatever reason. Can you kind of elaborate just a little bit, with the chairman's permission, elaborate a little more about that condition?
Well, I think, thank you for the question, Representative Gooden. I think that it's probably a matter for discussion, probably not today, but at another time among this group. I think we need to begin to review what are our opportunities to deal with this issue. The only thing I would say today is that I can affirm for you from the sources that I get on an ongoing basis all the time that the level of internet sales is still rising dramatically each year. And this year was no exception on Cyber Monday. And so I think as a matter of fairness to our bricks and mortar retailers who exist here, and also restating the proposition that this is a tax on consumption, so it's owed by the consumer wherever the consumer buys it or in however what form the consumer buys it. So, but I think we looking at our revenue sources, I think it would be pretty important for us to begin to drill in on that a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, I'd like to work with you as well, because I know on on our personal income tax, at the end of that, it asks, did you buy any products online? Do you owe sales tax? Yada, yada, yada. And, if you buy that in January or February, there's a lot of logical omissions. People just don't remember that kind of stuff, and they don't keep records of that stuff as they do that. So really, that little clause at the end of the income tax is practically a joke at this point. And I think we need to have a real conversation about how we're going to start including some of these internet sales, because, as you said, that's only fair to our brick and mortar businesses who are paying property taxes in the state and hiring employees in the state of Indiana. And we're allowing, almost like, as the gentleman said here, it's almost like the black market through the internet. That's not the proper term to use, but until Webster's comes up with the right terminology, I guess that's one we have to use along with the economists. So we really need to drill into that. And I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, we're losing, and Senator, I would suggest we're losing over $500 million a year, and at least in the biennium in sales tax in that realm. So thank you for allowing me to elaborate.
Senator Broden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have to ask, because it's in your slides in a couple different places, and you've referenced it. And I guess my question is, aside from the weather, what is, the sort of the politics, or sort of the business models of like Washington, Oregon, and California, to me, couldn't be more diverse and distinct than the politics and the business models of, say, Texas, North Carolina, and South Carolina. But yet they're both in the high job growth area, they're both in the population shift area, and they're both in the metric side on kind of where you want to be. Is there something besides weather? Is there like sort of technology on the West Coast that's sort of driving growth, and then sort of this low-cost efficiency model in the South and Southwest? Or are we doomed to this weather thing? Do we have to wait for this global warming to kick in, and we'll be the new North Carolina, or what? I mean, what?
I used to live in Seattle. My wife is from Seattle. The weather it's almost nicer here than it is. It rains here all the time. When I was working in the state of Washington, I wrote a paper for the state about why growth was so dynamic there. And the answer may not be very satisfying to you, but a lot of it would just happen to be just plain luck. The fact that Bill Gates happened to be born in the state of Washington, the fact that Bill Boeing happened to be living in the state of Washington when he decided to open an airplane company. I think that a lot has to do with the success of what's happening in the state of Washington. Having Microsoft there, in turn, led to just a lot of other companies opening up over there, like Amazon. And the same thing with Starbucks. The person who formed Starbucks, he just happened to be living there. So there wasn't an economic force that could explain why why that state has become a high wage state. It was mainly happenstance. So it's not a satisfying answer, but it's what I concluded.
So we need you to go out and be an entrepreneur, Senator Broden. You talk about consumption and consumer spending driving GDP growth in your forecasts. One of the things, though, you talk about is that it's an expanding service employment, and services are part of that consumption. And as we have baby boomers go through, do we not have them consume more services as opposed to real products?
Consume, right. That's the trend. We are consuming more services. Yes, the answer yes.
Do you do any of your trending or forecasting based on what we're losing related as we shift from a real product consumption base to a service consumption base?
Well, we have a consumer expert who does the forecast. I'm not quite sure what his model consists of, yes, we are generally seeing a movement toward the service economy, especially healthcare and education. So we're going to consume more of those going forward and fewer goods going forward. But
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Newport. Appreciate you coming to Indiana, and I understand you consumed in the state of Indiana last night to help our local economy, right? This time we'll have Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Weinman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm joined today by Bill Weinman, who is the new Assistant Director for the Division of Revenue within the State Budget Agency. Bill came to us from INDOT, where he was the economist for 5 years, and prior to that, 31 years with Chase Bank and its many predecessors. As the committee knows, the job of the Revenue Forecast Technical Committee is to select the equations that are used in the revenue forecast. Those equations then are matched up with the economic variables that are forecast by Global Insight, and that's what produces the revenue forecast. The committee is also assisted quite ably by the Legislative Services Agency and the staff of the State Budget Agency. We also have an advisor on the committee, John Grew, with the Indiana University. Through November, the state's total general fund revenue is $40 million below the April forecast and $17.9 million above the same period in fiscal year 15. A look at some of the major components of the revenue shows that sales tax is 3.3% below the April forecast, 4.4% below the same period in 15. Income tax, 5.3 above the April forecast and 3.3 below the same period in fiscal year 15. Corporate income tax, 18.8% below April 15 forecast and 18.3% below the same period in 15. And gaming is 1.8% above April forecast and 0.7% above the same period in fiscal year 15. As you just heard from Global Insight, the economic forecast remains stable with moderate growth. The December revenue forecast changes two equations, the sales tax and the corporate income tax. The December forecast also incorporates all of the 2015 legislative actions and the current phase down of the individual, corporate, and FIT tax rates from prior sessions. As I stated previously, the committee chose to change the sales tax model because we felt that the April sales tax equation was not adequately performing. As I stated, it was 3.3% below the April forecast. The committee spent quite a bit of time dealing with sales tax and the variables in the sales tax equation. We looked at various different variables trying to find the best fit. Those variables included the price of gas, vehicles sold, population demographics, personal consumption, and housing starts. Many of these same things as what you were talking about with Global Insights. We finally determined, or the committee finally settled upon, an equation that includes Indiana personal income, Indiana private housing starts, and Indiana population greater than 65. The committee also chose to change the corporate tax equation. We decided upon a equation this time that included lagged U.S. corporate profits and added an employment factor into the equation in order to more directly mirror the current revenues. As with any forecast, there's always uncertainty. And so as a normal good just disclaimer, we have a few, the committee had a few thoughts on these issues. You heard from Global Insight that we're in our 80th month of an expansion, and the average time period between recession is closer to 6 years. So we're nearly 2 years beyond a period of where we may very well have a recession around the corner. While potentially the things in Washington, D.C. are improving, there's still a uncertainty around federal budget policy. And then the low gas prices and housing starts, what those are going to do, I think, is an uncertainty that committee felt needed to be talked, or needed to be disclaimed, if you will, on our equations. So what you really want to hear is these are the outputs then from the equations after we've selected the equations and mirrored them with the economic factors from Global Insight. And I'll walk through each one, Mr. Chairman. On sales tax, the December 2015 revenue forecast would remove $159.1 million from fiscal year 2016, $174.4 million from fiscal year 17. Individual income tax, the new equations would add 128.3 to fiscal year 16, 89 million to fiscal year 17. Corporate income, the equations would remove 5.5 million in 16 and remove 28.2 million in 17. On gaming taxes, the December revenue forecast would remove 7.1 million in 16, 18.6 million in 17. All other taxes, the December forecast would add 3.5 million in 16 and take away 2.9 million in 17. So the December 2015 revenue forecast for total general fund taxes for 16, the new forecast would be 39.9 below the April forecast and 135 million below the April forecast for 17. As I mentioned earlier, this forecast incorporates all of the changes, legislative changes of 2015. Those actions that were previously taken cost $45.7 million in 2016 and $56.6 million in 2017. When you factor those changes into the difference between the April revenue forecast, the impact to the budget plan, if you will, of this revenue forecast would be that the revenue forecast would add 5.7 million in 2016 and remove 78.4 million in 2017. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? Just the handout I believe you got, people have on page 3, sales tax, it's minus 0.4% below same period FY 2015, correct? I think if you go back to page 3, you have it as minus 0.4. I think some of the people up here, they're telling me they have positive 0.4 on theirs.
There was an earlier draft. The initial draft that came out had it didn't have the negative sign and had it 0.4 above. And if you look at the November monthly revenue, you'll see that it's 0.4 below the same period. So the packet you have that was at your desk should be negative 0.4 below.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Senator Kenley.
Mr. Chairman, I noted on your sales tax revenue estimator items that you selected, and I'm sure you do this based on just looking at sets of numbers and see which are seem to be the more accurate predictors, but you added in there this Indiana population 65 years and older. I wonder if you could tell me how that relates to a greater accuracy product.
Well, it's the aging demographic, the market basket of goods and services consumed, and we wanted to enter that into the equation to account for that change in the market basket of goods and services purchased.
Well, then a brief follow-up. So could I say that Indiana has a more aging population, therefore the consumption habits of this crowd are a little more relevant to the prediction?
Yes,
So that's kind of what you're telling me.
correct.
And then I assume that in constructing your model, you look to see whether that conclusion has been following through the last few years, and you're saying there's a correlation.
A very high correlation, yes,
Yeah,
there
so
is,
thank
Senator.
you. So you're, instead of just telling us about the weather like Global Insight does, you're actually focusing in a little harder on this.
We are trying to do that, yes.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? I just want to give my appreciation to the revenue forecast team. I know it's a very difficult project, and again, accurate forecast is plus or minus 2%, which is plus 300 million, minus 300 million, and to look at this at 27 to 30 months out, as we do when we start to craft a budget, and to narrow it down into about 0.5%, I think is phenomenal. And I also want to give, my appreciation to everybody on Budget Committee and both sides of the aisle, both chambers, that, this is not an issue that we argue about. Other states argue about what the revenue numbers are and how much you can spend. We don't argue about that, which makes it a lot easier, a lot more collegial in the state of Indiana than other states. So I appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
At this time, we get to go to the other part of the forecasting, and hopefully it won't take quite as long as the first part, but are they in? Joe Mosier and Mr. Dalmer and Secretary Werner? Thank you. The floor is yours whenever you're ready to proceed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Um, The Part B premiums were projected to increase to $159 per month for seniors. And Medicaid, our Medicaid program pays those Part B premiums for 174,000 dual eligible members. These are individuals who qualify for both Medicare and Medicaid. And Medicaid pays their cost sharing so that they can receive services. That was a much larger increase than the state had previously anticipated in previous forecasts. Would have cost the state about $40.7 million. We wrote a letter to our congressional delegation outlining, highlighting what those costs would be. And shortly after that, Congress acted to reduce those Part B premiums to $123 a month for the senior and disabled population, which is actually going to cost us now about $15.1 million. So we had projected some level of growth in Part B premiums. I think this exceeds what we had projected by a little bit, but it's nowhere near the 40 that we were facing previously. So Congress came to our assistance there. The next item, incarcerated individuals. We last year did start covering in our Medicaid program hospitalizations for the Department of Corrections population when they leave the corrections system and get services provided in hospitals off-site. Medicaid is permitted to pay for that. And the federal dollars that we would get there in matching funds would offset expenditures that were previously Department of Corrections expenditures. With the expansion of HIP 2.0 in January, which started in February, that brought in a new class of individuals who would qualify for that program, pretty much the entire prison population. So over the course of this summer, we have built in the capability to pay the hospital claims for those individuals, both in the Department of Corrections care and also in county jails. And we have a memorandum of understanding signed with the Department of Corrections to capture the state share of the Medicaid costs for those populations. We collect that from the Department of Corrections budget. We also have contracts now signed with several counties to put up the state share of those funds. So that reduces their healthcare costs over what it was previously.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. So we're actually making DOC pay this portion of the state share, which is a lesser expense than they would have paid under DOC, but in essence, it's not a general fund. Well, it's general fund in that it's DOC general fund to Medicaid general fund.
That's right. They transfer the dollars from their accounts to FSSA accounts. I'm not sure where their funding comes from.
Is DOC doing a report of how much they're saving overall if there wasn't this program in place? Do we know?
And basically, we had looked at it. What we do is we track what claims we see for DOC inmates, so we see what the Medicaid program is paying for those individuals. So then based on that, we could determine what DOC would be saving based on that, because previously they would have paid 100% state dollars. Now, based on the claims, we know they're only paying 33% of that, so we could be able to generate that.
Under Italian.
Thank you. So how will this expansion to HIP 2.0, how will this affect the contracts with Corizon for healthcare?
Right. So these claims were previously paid by Corizon as DOC's contractor. That claims cost would be reduced because they're now capturing Medicaid funding for those claims. So the DOC would adjust their contracts with Corizon accordingly. I believe that the participation in the Medicaid program was anticipated in the latest revision that Corizon contract with the DOC. So they had built in some level of savings into this program already.
All right. Well, at some point, I'd like to get some information about that. I thought that they were supposed to give that to the Budget Committee anyway, but all right.
Okay, and the next item, we are underway with a rebalancing project, rebalancing our long-term care institutional expenditures in proportion to what we're spending on home and community-based services in non-institutional settings. We had a forum yesterday where a number of stakeholders came and heard from some national experts about how other states have done rebalancing. Indiana is second worst in the country as of 2013 in what we're spending in Medicaid for long-term care eligible individuals in nursing facilities versus non-institutional settings. We do seek to improve that. We're working collaboratively with the industry and other stakeholders involved to devise a plan to help the state rebalance those expenditures and get a better trajectory going in our Medicaid budget moving forward. Moving on to page 3. I did want to give the committee a general update on HIP 2.0 enrollment. You may be aware that we're now 11 months into implementation of the program. Oh, thanks. Since February 1st, we have received 550,000 applications for health coverage. Now, those are applications for HIP 2.0 and other Medicaid categories, but that is a very significant uptick over previous years. As of today, we currently have 355,000 individuals enrolled in HIP 2.0, and nearly 70% of all those participating in HIP 2.0 are participating in the HIP Plus plan, meaning they're making their power account contributions and are getting the benefits, the better benefits provided through HIP Plus versus HIP Basic. More than 87% of those individuals are below the federal poverty level. And even in the lowest income category, those below 5% of the federal poverty level who are required to make $1 contributions each month, 60% of them are paying for the Plus program and realizing the better benefits in HIP Plus. So they're seeing the value proposition in making their contributions each month. They're more engaged in their health care by virtue of having a stake in their health care financially and participating in HIP Plus. Once enrollees are in HIP Plus, we're seeing that they are making their payment. About 94% are ongoing making their payment each month. So very high proportion there, even higher than HIP 1.0. And since the launch of the program in February, we have seen about 2,200 more healthcare providers enroll into our Medicaid program to serve both Medicaid and HIP members. So we think the additional reimbursement that is provided through the HIP 2.0 program, in addition to traditional Medicaid, where we increase the reimbursement rates there, are helping to improve the recruitment of providers into the program, which improves access to those we serve. I would point out just on slide 3 here in the chart, you do see the current enrollment of the newly eligible population. These are not those that we transitioned into the program from other categories, but those who are truly newly eligible by virtue of the state expanding HIP 2.0. The current enrollment is a little below the forecasted enrollment. That is because of those individuals in the marketplace. There are about 65,000 individuals between 100 and 138% of poverty who qualify for HIP 2.0. And we originally were told by the federal government that those individuals would have to move into HIP 2.0 when the state expanded. The federal government has since told us that they can stay in the marketplace, and unless they come to the marketplace and request to be transferred to HIP 2.0, they would stay in the marketplace. So we're seeing a large number of them continue in the marketplace plan instead of coming into HIP 2.0. So we think that is really where our variance is coming from versus our projections.
Senator Kenley has a question.
Mr. Chairman. So these things that you've been recounting just the last few minutes, I mean, about people are meeting their copay obligation at an extremely high rate, which is indicating they're paying attention to the plan and participating in the thing. Plus the fact that we now, for the first time since I can remember anybody reporting this, we have more providers that are entering the network. So that's increasing the availability of good healthcare options for all these consumers. And then lastly, this piece of information about the people who are on the marketplace affecting a little bit the amount of HIP enrollment. These are all huge indicia that this thing is really working and that these people are participating, and they're participating in the ways that we wanted them to participate in terms of exercising their judgment and evaluating. So I think that I can't help but stop you and say that's a great thing. We're really pleased the plan's working that way.
Yeah, we think the program is off to a great start. We are seeing better patient engagement by the individuals in the PLUS program versus those in BASIC, and they're getting their preventive services at higher rates than those in BASIC, which is another indicator to us that they're more interested in their own health care and understand the consumer-driven aspects of the program. Okay, moving on to page 4. In the following pages, we're going to present the updated budgetary information. There are some risks that we have identified that could influence the numbers that we will present to you. First being the level of pharmacy rebates that we capture in our programs. We have recently carved in our pharmacy into our managed care programs. It was previously provided through our fee-for-service program as a carved-out managed care benefit. With the carve-in, we feel that that will reduce overall pharmacy expenditures by better managing the costs of pharmaceuticals, getting patients onto the correct mix of the drugs that they need, and probably reducing the number of scripts that are written, and certainly getting more individuals into cheaper generic drugs versus name brand drugs. However, we were capturing significant rebates on many of those higher cost brand name drugs, and so our rebate lines will probably reduce in the future, even though our overall pharmacy expenditures will have produced savings for the state. So we have reflected a 5% reduction in our pharmacy rebates over the current level, and we're watching closely what the state collection of those pharmacy rebates will be in the new managed care environment so that we can make more accurate projections in the future. The cost for autism therapy, we are adding a new benefit, applied behavioral analysis, to our state plan. I will talk about that a little bit later today in the state plan amendments that I'm presenting to the committee. It is a mandated benefit from CMS. They told all states last summer that states are now required to cover applied behavioral analysis for kids with autism. The rates of the utilization of that service is somewhat unpredictable at this point. We can only go off of the experience in other states that have added this benefit already. So we have built in to our budget a projection of what we think we will spend. I think it is a very conservative estimate. It is a little bit lower than what we anticipated in April, but the costs of that are variable and unknown at this time, so we'll watch that closely when we add that benefit. Additional contingencies will depend on enrollment in HIP 2.0 and some of the mix of the categories that the HIP 2.0 enrollees are in as the program continues to mature and the enrollment categories that those individuals are in shake out.
Senator Kenley.
This autism determination, is that a doctor's determination as opposed to, we hear from the school people all the time, and so who decides whether you have this condition?
A physician's order is required. I actually am fortunate to have a physician on our team, my boss, who is very familiar with this benefit. I would ask Secretary to speak to that.
Well, I don't think he needs to really comment on it. I think the point is that if this is going to be a required addition, we need to get our hands around. There seems to be a little bit of a cloudy perception of who is autistic and who is not, and we're going to have to drill down on this pretty definitively in order to be able to capture what we think the exposure audience will be.
Right, Senator, that there's still a prior authorization process, so we'll have to make sure the diagnosis is correct and that ABA is the right type of therapy for that particular child. So it doesn't do away with prior authorization, so it's not open access to that benefit. It just means that we now have to cover that benefit, which wasn't covered before.
Which is fair enough, and if that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be, but you guys need to set it as a priority as to how you structure that so that you can make sure you get it right.
Okay, moving on to slide 5, where we present the projected forecast for state fiscal year 16 and 17, I would highlight a few numbers on this page. First, you will see in our Health Indiana plan, we do see very significant increases in spending in 16 and 17 over 14 and 15, reflecting the launch of the program. Hoosier Care Connect, of course, did not exist before this year. It was the Care Select program, and so you see that program having dramatic increases in spending as well. But the members there came from other Medicaid categories where we were spending. We're actually going to be realizing savings from the additional care supports that that population will have. Total Medicaid expenditures for state fiscal year 16 will surpass $10 billion for the first time, 10.6 in fiscal year 16 and 10.7 in fiscal year 17. And then the state proportion of that going down to the line at the bottom of the page, you may be familiar that we carried over $128 million in additional funds from 2015 to cover 2016 costs. We're anticipating that we will be using at least $13.4 million of that, which would end the state fiscal year 16 with a projected positive balance position of about $114.6 million. And then we are reflecting about $109 million positive position in 2017. So, Rob, is
Director
there anything
Bailey
else?
has a question, I believe, Joe.
Comment about the 262.6 and the 128. In the budget law, 128 million was required to be funded for the Medicaid appropriation in fiscal 16 from prior year funds, so that includes fiscal year 2015, and it includes some closed POs from a prior years before fiscal 15 of about 27 million. So that 128 in essence is coming out of the 262.6. There's 27 million of prior year closed POs that factor into this as well, but it's not 262 that's going to go back to the general fund by operation of law. It's some amount below that. I just want to make that clear.
Senator Talion?
So just following up on that, so we've got 262 minus the 128, which is about 134 or something. Where is that going?
By operation of the budget law, the status quo is those dollars will go back to the general fund. And just to be clear, there's 27 million in prior year closed POs. So when we have a purchase order or a contract that we make that requires us to encumber funds, we set funds aside. That contract doesn't always spend what we thought was going to be spent, so there's leftover money, and that 27 million is part of leftover money from prior year contracts, prior year purchase orders. It's not reflected here because it's prior to fiscal 15, but I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that.
All right. So just one more time. So we've got the 134. Is that taking away the 27, or is that in addition to the 27?
In addition to the 27.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, slides 6 and 7 explain some of the variances between the forecast that we presented in April and the forecast that we're presenting today. I'm going to let Rob explain a couple of these.
Good morning. And looking at slide 7, it provides some of the discussion points for trying to understand and reconcile between what we had presented in April of this year for state fiscal year 16 and 17 versus what we're observing today. We have seen several positive variances or reductions in our expenditures. We've highlighted several of these key areas. First of all, our long-term care expenditures. We have had a slightly lower rate of growth, increase in costs than what we had projected, so that created some savings into our programs. Under the Hoosier HealthWise and HIP programs, we've had a few things changing. These are policy changes that have occurred. We had anticipated higher growth due to a change in our renewal policy. The state has implemented a program where there's some electronic files matching between the Medicaid enrollment and other databases. This was working through discussions with CMS. They implemented these. It was unknown how many new lives would stay on to the program through this. So we had 3 scenarios, 1, 2, and 3. We chose scenario 2. We probably came in a little bit closer to scenario 1. So that has about a $20 million state impact. We have historically had some performance payments set aside for the managed care operations or for the managed care plans. Historically, they've earned back a little over 50% of those performance payments. We had previously budgeted them earning back 100% of their performance payments, but now that we've had several years that they have improved, but we are projecting that they'll continue to receive about 50% of their performance payments and returns, which is about another $10 million state. And then there's also a change in retroactive eligibility enrollment, which we've observed as well. And we've seen about 10,000 fewer retroactive lives in any given month. And we'll see that on the next slide. And again, that's an additional $10 million state. In addition to the Hoosier HealthWise program having lower retroactive enrollment, we're also seeing lower retroactive enrollment in the non-dual disabled population. It appears to be related to our conversion to 1634 eligibility provision for our disabled, which changed from the state operationalizing the medical review team and doing the eligibility determination for those disabled and relying on the Social Security Administration disability determination. So again, there we're observing about 6,500 fewer lives on a retroactive basis. And then there was a slight change due to some of the APR DRG implementation as well, which results in $20 to $25 million state.
Senator Tynan has a question.
I'm not sure if this is the right timing, but I'm going to ask it now anyway, because it looks like it's the right place. It's my understanding, and I just want to get this straight, that last year in the budget, we had previously reduced the reimbursement rates for some of the Medicaid providers, and now in the last budget, we put that back and phased in over a couple of years. Are those numbers included in this forecast?
So Senator, I believe that we actually continued the rate reductions for most providers that were previously in place, except for the developmentally disabled population residing in intermediate care facilities, ICF facilities, which we did restore, or the legislature restored the rates for that particular group. But the other rate reductions were continued in the budget you all passed this spring.
All right, so those waiver, that increase in that phase-in add, I'm not saying this right, but the increase in the reimbursement rate to those people is included in here?
Yes, yes, it is.
All right, well then let me ask you this question, because I'm now hearing that FSSA has a new plan for those people, and that you're doing some new waiver amendment for the developmentally disabled. Is that going on?
So, Senator, that is not in my area. Another division of FSSA, Developmental and Rehab Services, administers those programs. I am not prepared to speak to that today. So.
All right, I just wondered if we've got a new change, and is that included in this forecast? You don't know?
I think any changes in that area are still being discussed and under development, so I do not believe they would be reflected in this current forecast that you see today.
So what we've got today includes the previous addition to,
So it's 2.5%, which
Right.
came last year, and 2.5% this year.
all right, so is that going to change in this new amendment?
No, it's really two different things. The new proposal has more to do with paying for these patients on a daily rate rather than in 15-minute blocks of time. And in terms of actual revenue change, it's not really going to amount to much. We're following CMS guidance on this, and that doesn't come out till next year.
All right, so I'm just trying to figure out what these new changes are going to do with, have to do with the old reimbursement rate. Are these people going to be getting more money, or are we not getting them more money?
They're different services. Some are within residential facilities, others are case rates for the actual therapies that are being provided within those.
We can follow up with
All right.
you on your
Yeah, I'm
questions
not
on
sure
that when
that
we
I'm
get with our
getting my
colleagues.
question answered, but, all right, thank you.
Okay, moving to slides 8 and 9, they show some changes in projected enrollment in different categories. We do see some continued movement within our programs and what categories members qualify for. Rob, anything you'd want to highlight on these slides?
Slide 8 does provide you the average enrollment in the program. So we are projecting for state fiscal year 16 an average monthly enrollment of 1.4 million lives, and that would be growing to 1.5 million lives. As previously shown or discussed, most of our lives will be enrolled in a managed care program. The residual population that we have in fee-for-service will be about 304,000 lives remaining in fee-for-service, with most of those individuals either residing in a nursing home, on a waiver program, or dual eligible individuals, those that are in Medicare and Medicaid programs. So those are remaining in fee-for-service. However, you can see the continued growth in managed care through either the HIP 2.0, the Hoosier Care Connect program, or the Hoosier HealthWise program. On slide 9, just briefly, you can see some of the retroactive eligibility, which is shown down in the fee-for-service program, where I had previously indicated Hoosier HealthWise retroactive enrollment is down by about 10,000 lives on a monthly basis, and the retroactive non-dual disabled is down by about 6,500 lives on the fee-for-service program on an average monthly basis as well. So those are the two areas that have generated some of the reduction in our projected expenditures during those two fiscal years.
You have enrollment numbers for children in pregnancy at 616,000. We have, what, 88 to 90,000 births in Indiana a year. What percent are covered under Medicaid?
We pay for births about 33,000 births per year.
So we're only paying a third? I thought we were closer or higher than that.
So I believe the latest numbers I reviewed were we pay for about 40,000 births, and there are about 80,000 in the state. So it is
About half.
nearly half.
That's
Yep.
what I thought so too. Okay. 1.5 million in 17 is about 22 to 23% of our population. We have an unemployment rate of 4%. Isn't that out of balance?
I can't speak to that. I mean, there are probably many factors that go into play. Expanding, these include the folks in the HIP 2.0 program at 138% of poverty, which is about $16,400 for an individual and $33,800 for a family of 4. So, there could be some employed individuals who are still qualify for some of those programs, but.
I just wanted to put a plug in right here and right now for raising the minimum wage. Might take care of this.
Representative Gooden.
I would like to ask, and maybe you don't have these numbers, or maybe this is something we really need to look closely at, is the fact that the amount of abatements that we give companies to come into the area as compared to their wages they pay. And some folks may seem to think that we are subsidizing or big businesses or the old term corporate welfare, and the fact that we allow a lot of abatements, the locals and the state as well. We invest a lot of money in those corporations. In return, then they pay a lower than living wage. In return, then the state still has to cover their medical costs through Medicaid, and also they are eligible for free books and free lunch at school, so the locals are covering that as well. So is there a way to be able to put together a demographic on the salary or wages earned versus the abatements that these corporations may be getting? And maybe that should go over to the IEDC, or maybe you folks in the IEDC can work in partnership to try to find that, because I really think there's a real correlation between that, and I think that's probably not good business for the state of Indiana. So I'd like to see that if I could.
Do you have any further?
Nope, that concludes our formal presentation. Happy to answer any other questions the committee may have.
Representative Klinker?
Your Medicaid waiver list for the dramatically, and I'd like to thank you very much for that. What you're doing, what is the Medicaid waiver list?
I don't have the specific numbers, but I can tell you the amount of time on the wait list is down to 1.5 years approximately. Do you have?
Somebody said 15. It was maybe down to 6 months.
Yeah, it's more like 6 months, and the numbers are down significantly, Representative. So we can get you the exact number by the end of the day.
I know it was five years not that long ago, so we have made significant progress in bringing it down.
Maybe just following up with kind of what Representative Gooden, Senator Talley, and myself. I mean, I know, and especially in the pregnancy category, we go up to higher income levels, do we not? We're up to 250%. If we 200%, if we mirrored the ACA law and said we'd cover below 138%, could they purchase products in the marketplace or on the exchange, the federal exchange? I mean, are we paying for something that might be in the marketplace out there?
Well, yeah, I'll let Rob answer first, and then I'll.
Yeah. There are some eligibility restrictions under the ACA, how the states can change their eligibility provisions for pregnant. There is a maintenance of effort for pregnant women, and so. No, they actually went back quite a ways. It was your eligibility coverage in December of, I believe it was 1989, was the eligibility threshold for pregnant women. So.
Any other further comments or questions? Thank you. We'll continue to have ongoing discussions, I'm sure.
Thank you, sir.
Lots of moving parts, aren't there? I see a lot of providers in the audience, right? Got all your questions answered, providers? Certainly. Thank you. Thank you. At this time on the agenda, we're going to agency projects, some of our more routine items, and we have Department of Natural Resources. Thank you, Cam, Mr. Clark, for being so patient.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Happy holidays. We have the first 5 items on this portion of your agenda. I'll go through them in order. Our first request is for the construction of what will be our legacy projects for 2016. As I hope you all know, 2016 marks the 100 year anniversary of the state park system. It's also the state's bicentennial, but it's our centennial. And we've chosen these shelter houses as our legacy project. They are going to be typical in their function and their low maintenance, but they're unique in design. It's a project that was a collaboration. The conceptual design was from students at Rose-Hulman University who worked with students from Gonzaga University that came up with the design. That was about a year ago. The request of $349,000 and some change is the general fund portion of their overall construction costs.
Thank you. I think go ahead and continue on the projects, and maybe we'll take questions at the end of your segment here. How's that?
Number 2, as you've heard me say before, we are in a continuing process of updating our facilities to make them ADA compatible. This is the Nature Center at Brown County State Park. May seem familiar. I was here in June on this one. You approved a certain amount for these improvements. However, bids came in higher than the estimates, so we're back requesting another $63,000 and change from the general fund on this one. Item number 3 is another repeat item, if you will. However, there is no general fund request attached to this one. About a year ago, you approved our matching portion for the construction of some shooting ranges at 2 of our fish and wildlife areas. Bids came in higher than estimated. In this case, quite a bit higher. So we felt like it was important that you got a update on the both projects. In this instance, we are able to come up with our matching portion of the additional funds from current resources. The federal match is also there. Again, we're not requesting additional funds. This is more of an informational item. Number 4, this marks about the end of our digital flood insurance rate map, floodplain mapping program that we are doing with FEMA and local entities. 3 high-risk flood areas in Howard, Delaware, and Wells County will be remapped through this portion of the program. Our last item is what is going to be titled Phase 1 of our updating of our playgrounds on a number of our properties. Again, we have some outdated facilities that, among other things, are not ADA compatible. This is a request to update 45 of those facilities. That will mean that we have 1 ADA compatible playground at all of our parks and state forests. We hope to update others as priorities come and money exists, but this particular request is for 45 different sites.
Senator Talion.
Cam, I just have a question about number 3. It just seems to me that $5.5 million is a lot of money for shooting ranges. Do you take in income from this?
We do take in some revenue from this. The revenue that we take in, I would not say is enough to, it's not a payback amount over a period of time. But the facilities are going to be designed so that you do pay for the time that you're using them.
All right. Any idea, percentage-wise, what the fees are for this?
Well, we have others that are modern facilities that we have contract with somebody to run them for us. So in those cases, our revenue is set by contract. The usage of them would determine how much revenue they generate. These two are planned in areas of the state where there isn't a facility like this for people to go and shoot.
Okay.
Representative Gooden?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here, Cam. Just a general statement about the construction costs. Was there not as many bidders? Did you guys dig into the numbers on the bids and see was the materials extremely high or
The
what?
one up in Newton County had, I think, 2 bidders, and we feel like that's probably why the figure was higher up there. We figured the one in Putnam County was going to be, that was going to come in lower because there would be, its proximity to Indianapolis, there'd be more bidders, which there were, but to our surprise, the amounts were not as low as we thought they'd be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Maybe follow up with Representative Gooden. Did you see that it was an increase in materials, or was it an increase in wages that maybe made the bids higher? And
Did not look at them closely enough to know the answer to that question.
somebody's over there, I think it's back to our discussion, our wages going up, because of employment levels and things like that. And I guess I would presume materials have stayed about the same. Transportation costs, cost of oil have kept that moderated, that it's really probably wages more than anything.
Indicate that it doesn't break it down.
Okay, so,
We can provide that information, though.
I guess we're trying to answer each other's questions or presumptions that we think, right? Political points? Yeah. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll then go to the Department of Administration, Mr. Larson.
Turnstiles? Oh, man. All right. Good morning. Jason Larison, Deputy Director for Public Works in the Department of Administration, presenting for State House floor repairs. I'm sure that you've probably spent a little bit of time down in the basement here. I've noticed some of the heaving and cracking has gone on in the State House floors. We've done some repairs in some of the worst areas. What we're basically finding is that we're having conduits that were buried initially inside of the concrete that is rusting and heaving, and that is a big reason why we're having the issues that we do downstairs. This funding will address some more of those areas. The work will occur after the legislative session, so we don't want to impose on any of y'all during this.
Will it disrupt the press area as you repair these booths? No, I'm kidding. Rhetorical question. Any further questions or comments? Thank you. Appreciate your time. Next, we have the Advocate General, Colonel Bailey is here, and I believe Mr. Dunning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Colonel Retired Todd Townsend. This is John Bailey and John Dunning I have with me. On behalf of the Adjutant General, Major General Carr, he would have been here today, but he is down in Fort Bliss, Texas, welcoming home some soldiers that have been over in Kuwait for the last year, but he told us to extend his regrets, but he would have been here otherwise, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. As most of you are probably aware, we have 62 armories from throughout the state, not to include numerous vehicle and equipment storage buildings as well. And so this request is to allow us to assist us in the maintenance of these overall facilities, to assist our great men and women of the National Guard. We're requesting $485,500 to assist in miscellaneous repairs of
are different HVAC, electrical type issues, roofing issues, and electrical repairs. This, as winter approaches and as our boilers get turned on, things start breaking and tearing, and this would allow us to provide the adequate maintenance for these facilities.
Any questions, comments? Thank you very much. Very straightforward. Appreciate your time coming today. Next, we have the Indiana Office of Technology, Mr. Neely. And you can talk about both items and then.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. The first item on the list is speaking as a partner with Horse Racing Commission. Their main line of business application for licensing and security is many moons past support. They've just kind of been stuck in an area where it was developed back in 1995. The talent has since left, and it's kind of just been riding on its own. We've done what we can on the technology side to keep it up and going for them. Unfortunately, we're reaching the point to where security concerns and concerns of downtime are becoming to kind of come to the surface. The biggest fear now is that it takes a crash and there's no talent, no one to call to get the application back up for them. So what we've done, we worked with them to solicit, we solicited 3 bids. Salesforce was included, and eImagine with the help of Microsoft, and then also our in-house talent that we have for application development. We were able in-house to present a solution to them that the closest next bid was about $50,000 more. We feel that we can help them rewrite that application and prepare it for withstand the future. Next item is the Microsoft Office upgrade. This is to kind of modernize the remaining end seats that we manage at the Office of Technology for the state users. We're about halfway there for upgrading the Office product. This would cover the rest. We're looking to take advantage of this opportunity due to the fact that Microsoft's main goal going forward is to push businesses and enterprises towards a pay-as-you-go subscription model. So we're approaching some of the last times where we can actually get a buy once and keep forever type of product. With the volume requested here and the end of the year time frame, we were also able to negotiate an additional 7% discount than we would normally get for this. That's going to equate in the savings on this of about $343,000. And we were also able to negotiate the installment plan for 2 payments with no financing fees and access to all 15,000 licenses upon first payment.
Sounds like you strong-arm Microsoft. Any questions or comments? Senator Talian.
Thank you. Is this money that was already appropriated in somewhere?
Yes, in the budget.
In
Under IoT.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Neely. Thank you for your time. Next, we'll move on to university projects. Indiana State University, Ms. McKee. Thank you for patience.
Good morning, or what's left of the morning, I guess. The project before you today is the renovation of Cromwell Hall. It is the third of a 4-phase project for the renovation of the Sycamore Tower student housing complex on the campus of Indiana State University. This complex was originally constructed in the 1950s and has had only minimal upgrades since that time. The first phase, Mills Hall, is complete and is being occupied by students this fall. The second phase, Bloomberg, is under renovation, and then, of course, Cromwell would be the next in line. Included in the renovations is the installation of air conditioning, full fire suppression systems, masonry restoration, as well as replacement of heating systems, windows, and elevators. The total cost of the project is estimated at $23 million and would be funded through the issuance of long-term debt and housing and dining reserves of the housing system. And we ask your approval to proceed with this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Diane? Senator Talion.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that you're the first one up, so you're going to get this question, although I probably am going to ask this question of a lot of these projects. And here's my concern. In the last session, this legislature repealed the prevailing wage, common construction wage statute. And we also made some changes to the procurement statutes for local government. I'm not sure that we got all those changes right, and I'm not sure that they apply to these projects anyway, but the bottom line, my question is, what steps are we going to start taking on some of these big projects to ensure that these projects are going to responsible bidders and that the jobs are going to Indiana businesses and Indiana wage earners, instead of just, giving them to the lowest bidder, who might all be from out of town and take the money and run. So I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do about this now that we don't have a common wage statute anymore. So you're up first.
All right. Well, in order to comply with Indiana law, we have removed the references to the prevailing wage or common construction wage from our bid forms. However, that is the only change we have made to our design specifications or to any of our bid documents. When we are fortunate enough to be able to undertake a project of this magnitude, a multi-million-dollar project, those renovations have to last for a long time. And we are very cognizant that it needs to have quality workmanship and quality materials. I think that's what the state expects as state taxpayers, and that's what our students deserve. In West Central Indiana, Terre Haute in particular, as you may be aware, we have a very historic and very rich tradition of unionized labor. The majority of the contractors that we normally deal with, they have existing union contracts which they are obligated to honor and or try to renegotiate, I presume, if they could. The majority of the bidders that we see, particularly on a project like this, are from West Central Indiana. We do not attract a lot of bidders from Indianapolis. Most of the labor in the trades are union, they are union members. And so we are likely to have, this may have less impact on Indiana State University because of where we're located and the rich tradition we have of union labor in Terre Haute.
Well, thank you for that answer. I just hope that you feel there is enough leeway in the responsible bidder qualifications to make sure that you're getting good people and that you're buying Indiana according to Department of Administration rules or suggestions. So
we asked several questions on our bid forms that are more than just the price, if you will. We ask what experience they've had, what litigation may they have been involved in, have they completed projects on time, and so we also ask that they provide a list of their subcontractors who's going to be working on the project. So we go into some depth in when we are soliciting bids certainly for a project of this magnitude.
thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Next, we go to Indiana University and Dr. Morrison.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Indiana University has two projects for you this morning. First one is an expansion of our School of Dentistry on our Indianapolis campus. As you know, Indiana University houses the only School of Dentistry in the state of Indiana. And this would be what would be the fourth expansion over its history. We are one of the largest schools of dentistry in the country. This expansion is roughly 46,000 square feet, and as an addition to its existing building, it will house research space and operatories and clinic space for students. Those functions right now have been located within the hospital complex. Particularly, they were located in the Wishard complex, which has since been demolished, and the research space is in a building that's scheduled for demolition as well. This project will be funded from a combination of philanthropy, indirect cost recovery funds on research, and capital funds in the School of Dentistry. Total cost is $21.6 million. I'll be happy to answer any questions there or move on to the second one, Mr. Chairman. Second project is also here in Indianapolis, which is a build-out of research space in the Neuroscience Research Center, which is located adjacent to Methodist Hospital. This is a project that was, the original facility was built and opened a few years ago. During the recession, we had to downscale the project a little bit, and so we left some space unfinished, knowing that we would come back at some point due to the growth in research that has happened. And so we are proposing to finish out about 10,000 square feet of research space on the first floor, which would be laboratory for laboratory and animal research and offices, and that'll be a $3 million project, also funded from philanthropy. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Go ahead, Senator Tallien.
Ask you if you'll answer the same question. I assume I don't have to repeat it, but what's IU doing about this new situation we have?
Yeah, Indiana University, as you know, we fund as much construction in the public market in the state of Indiana as anybody, maybe with the exception of INDOT. And so far, like my colleague Diane, we have adapted our documents to remove the prevailing wage requirement from there. We see that the economy has the biggest impact on the market rather than the wage. We're not seeing any savings in our projects because the economy's humming along, and as you just heard in terms of the construction market. So to an earlier question from Representative Brown, we are seeing a decrease in bidders across all of our projects, generally speaking. We do not have as much of a, like most of us, we don't have an out-of-state problem. That is not something that we see. Our projects are generally regionally based. So if we bid two projects like these in central Indiana, the firms who bid on those projects are going to be from central Indiana. There will be subcontractors from time to time that are supplying us a very specific product that may come from out of state. And that you'll see that on research projects. Like Indiana State, we go through in our specifications, not only an issue of price, but also looking at previous service to the university, previous performance, and trying to make sure that we get the best deliverers of construction and services that we can, and that includes professional services for the dollars that we spend. We want nothing, if at all, we do not want to have a project delayed by contractors who or service providers who either leave us mid-job, go bankrupt, any of those things. And so we work very hard to make sure that those contractors that we have on our jobs will be with us through the end and they do deliver a quality product.
Purdue University, Mr. Hahn. I guess I didn't have my blue light on.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Tony Hahn with Purdue University. I have one project to present to you today, which is actually a variety of numerous projects at a variety of campuses. This is a multi-campus special R&R repair and rehabilitation for deferred maintenance projects that was part of the biennial budget just passed earlier this year, funded from the biennial budget at $12,500,000. Pursuant to the budget, $10 million of that is at the Fort Wayne campus, and the balance split between the new Purdue Northwest campus. The focus is on student success and rehabilitating some of the highest priority deferred maintenance projects. The main focus is classroom renovations, student access to certain buildings, student success centers. There's a variety of projects listed, almost a total of 20 total renovations throughout the 3 campuses. Some of the classrooms will be renovated from their original fixtures and original furnishings to better reflect teaching delivery methodology today, some being flipped to impact classes or flipped classrooms that many of you have seen, which much more the integration of technology into the classroom as well as movable furniture that more reflects how the studies are delivered.
Any questions, Senator Talion?
Well, I can ask you the same question, please. Yeah, I thought you might just offer it up, but, okay.
To make sure there weren't any amendments. And I don't have a lot, I don't have much more to add than my colleagues from Indiana State or IU. The amount of construction that we do across all 4 of our campuses it keeps a lot of people very busy. And so quality, very important that we get the most value for our dollar and a quality component that won't be reflected in later R&R or litigation or other problems. Now, one thing I will add is that we've been utilizing a new construction delivery methodology, construction manager as constructor, CMC, that was authorized about 2 sessions ago. And that is the request of professional services from a construction manager. And with that, much like Dr. Morrison said, we take a look at previous engagement with that contractor, and it's a professional service that we can grade for quality. And we feel that that is delivering projects on time, under budget, shifts the risk to that contractor, and we feel delivers a quality project.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Gooden.
I just want to say, I apologize, Tony, and the Indiana State folks. I did want to thank Dr. Morrison there being very open and transparent in their construction work and all the projects they do there as well. Had some meetings with him about that over some concerns, and it's been great. And I just want to publicly say thank you. Apologize, I haven't had this situation with you folks yet, but I hope to maybe someday be able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll go to the review items, and we have Indiana Sports Corporation. I believe Mr. Vaughn is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know you have a very busy agenda today, so I do appreciate the time to report out on our tourism grant. My name is Ryan Vaughn. I'm the president of Indiana Sports Corp. I'm joined here by Jason Sands, who's the executive director of the Evansville Sports Corporation, but also the president of Sports Indiana. As I mentioned, our organizations are fortunate enough to be the recipient of a $550,000 grant from the Office of Tourism. We really use that in 3 different ways. The first of which, 150 goes towards the state's contribution to the Big Ten partnership. That money is leveraged with both additional city dollars and private contributions to host a variety of Big Ten championships. We're very fortunate, most recently last year, to win a bid for 16 different Big Ten conference championships to take place over the next 6 years. So a great success for us. In addition to that, we also just finished our 5th Big Ten championship, which was the most successful one we've had thus far. There's a sheet that has been passed around that shows the direct fiscal impact of that particular event, as well with 4 other events that we've had this year, all of which were very successful. The Big Ten, most recently, about a $17 million impact. The P&G Gymnastics Championships, which we had late summer, close to an $8 million impact. The Final Four, which is one of the most significant event properties in the country, of course, closer to a $76 million impact. And then swimming and diving championships, which we have routinely every year in Indianapolis, a little over $1.5 million. So collectively, only focusing on those four particular events, the sheet that I've passed out for you demonstrates a financial impact of over $100 million, but specifically on the return of your investment, state taxes generated in excess of $8.5 million. So we're very happy with the successes we've had with all of those. The second use of those dollars is to attract these events. So we use about $200,000 of that grant, both to go out across the country, attend conferences, and meet with event rights holders to get them to bring their event to Indiana. We also pay event rights fees out of that. So, for example, if you have some spare time today, we are in the middle of the U.S. Diving Winter Nationals Championship taking place at the newly renovated IU Natatorium. And that is one of the events where we're able to win using that particular source of revenue. And the last helps Sports Indiana, and I'll let Jason talk a little bit about that particular initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last element of the request is $150,000 for Sports Indiana, $100,000 specifically for the grant program, and then $50,000 to support the marketing promotion of Sports Indiana and the grant program. Sports Indiana has continued to gain momentum and success since its inception in 2007. These funds allow Sports Indiana to continue programming that awards grants to communities throughout the state, intending to bid for sporting events in accordance with its mission to promote sports tourism and positive economic development statewide throughout a variety of sports and sporting events. Sports Indiana tourism development grants are available to nonprofit tourism or sports-related organizations to support and conduct athletic events that are planned, presented, promoted, and played here in Indiana. And to give you a sense of the scope of what we're talking about when we talk about sports tourism in the state, in 2015, there's 24 Sports Indiana members that hosted 659 sporting events at more than 200 venues in our state. So besides the efforts here in Indianapolis, there's a lot of efforts going on around the state when it comes to sports tourism, and our grant program supports that. To date, we've given out 46 grants since 2011. That's equated to over $102 million in total expenditures for the state and generated over $8.8 million in sales tax allowance. So we're making an impact with this grant program. In addition to the grant program, we've requested $50,000 for marketing purposes. We believe the majority of these funds are best used to develop a mechanism which we can measure sports tourism's economic impact throughout the state. Our friends at Visit Indy have developed a widely accepted and verified model to measure the economic impact of general tourism. We'd like to take that model one step further and add components such as ticket sales, gate fees, event infrastructure that support additional economic impact. We're in the beginning stages of discussions with Visit Indy right now, and we expect this to be a year-long project that we look forward to reporting back to the committee here soon. In closing, the state of Indiana has benefited significantly from the similar past appropriations. Pivotal opportunities are on the horizon. The NCAA is actually doing a bidding process that starts this spring, where over 800 championships are up for bid. Last time around, we had 17 different communities or events that were awarded to our state, and we'd hope to expand on those efforts this time around and get more championships awarded to our state. Again, Indianapolis will be home to the Olympic trials, which garners the Olympic TV as the summer games, and we want to remain a go-to host for sporting events as the state of Indiana. So again, on behalf of Ryan, the Sports Corporation Board, and the Sports Indiana Board, I truly appreciate your time today.
Questions? Senator Kenley.
I know we got a tight agenda here, Mr. Chairman. This kind of, just to reiterate for the members, when we first started granting them some money, the theory was that we could actually have some direct impact and some measurable returns on investing a few $100,000 here. And I had put in there that they report to the Budget Committee every year, and so that's why we're seeing these folks. And I'm glad that Jason showed up today. One of the challenges that I had issued to them is that sometimes people think it's just the city of Indianapolis here that drives a lot of stuff, but really, he and his 23 partners around the state, if any of the members want a detailed explanation of what championships or have been held in those areas, I think they would be truly amazed at the result on that. I think the numbers reflect those things, but I just want to give the background for the committee members.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I guess maybe going forward, are there any pressures or things coming in the horizon that make this a tougher environment, or is the environment such that we do such a good job? I mean, part of it is, I know Indianapolis and the whole state of Indiana, we sell ourselves well in hosting these events, but what kind of things might be in the future?
Yeah, the competition for premier sporting events is ever increasing. Candidly, many of the major cities or mid-tier cities across the country have seen the success that the state of Indiana has had, and they've built models to help spur their development. The Indiana Sports Corporation was the first sports corporation in the country, and there are now more than 500. And so the competition gets more fierce. The value of these properties continue to increase, and then so raising the money necessary, either privately or through investment from the state or the city to do that becomes more and more of a challenge.
And investments on the private side, have you seen any plateau, or there still seem to be our corporate and private partners still have interest?
They certainly have an interest. That interest is not an annual interest, but it might be once every 4 or 5 years to go out and raise money for big events like a Super Bowl or a college football playoff or so forth and so on. But there's some fatigue out there when you try and do too much all the time, and so we have to balance that private fundraising need along with what we go bid on, for sure.
Any further questions?
Yes, as we all know, that happened very near to the NCAA Men's Final Four this last year. So I obviously have a very close relationship with the NCAA as the host of that event. We work alongside of them and with folks in this room and with the mayor to help set the national image straight on who we are and what we want to be. And I am working with the Indy Chamber as part of their coalition this next session.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for being patient today. Next, we have Major Moose and IFA, and Mr. Hughey and Mr. Stark and Mr. Bailey.
Morning. First of all, thank you. Does everybody have a copy of the slide deck that we can go through? Okay, thank you. Yes, blue light's on. Well, the very first page is a actual picture of the actual map of the project itself. This is the I-69 Major Moves 2020 expansion project, which the actual overview is we're going to be constructing an additional travel lane along I-69 within the median from exit 205, which is 116th Street and 37. On the map, it shows that the area that's in blue is what I'm describing right now on the map itself. Second part of the project is constructing an additional outside auxiliary lane on I-69 from 106th Street down to 116th Street. And the third part of the scope was modifying the existing Diamond Interchange at exit 210, which is Campus Parkway, where the Clips Music Center is. Make everybody familiar about that. The structure of this procurement is a fixed design, design build, what we call a best value. That's why we're using the P3 statute to engage with this project, or with this procurement. The funding for this project is funded by our state dollars from the NDOT Major Moves 2020 Fund appropriations. This is part of the second tranche of the $200 million of the Major Moves 2020 Trust Fund. Is substantially funding the project. That was $55 million from that group of $200 million, and then the remainder of the project, $30 million, will come out of the third tranche of the $100 million of the Major Moves Trust Fund going forward. This is a procurement. The bid scope itself is set up for, normally a lot of projects are done in a design build, low bid, or a design bid build. This is a project that we introduced a new concept of. We have $85 million. We want to see how far we can go. So we set up the, when you look at the map, that blue area is set up for the original scope of the project itself. And then we challenged the teams that came to the table to say, this is what we know we should be able to build for this $85 million. How much further can we go? And we set up the procurement for in the best value environment to work that way. So the bid scope itself was set up, and then the initial cost was $85 million. Our anticipated construction is 2 years, starting in this spring. And then we also, in our bid process, we put in a potential for an additional scope to be awarded, and that was if we got as far as we thought we could go, if there was a need from an engineering decision to be made, that the IFA would actually have the opportunity to add to the original scope of $85 million. And as I go through this, I'll show you what we've done. But if you look at the map again, the red area and the purple area that exist on the map, there's a little green dot. That's where the procurement ended as far as how far we got with the best bid. And then we made a decision, NDOT and IFA together made a decision to add to that scope. So we added an additional $5.9 million that came out of our capital program at NDOT to make up the difference. So the contract price is now at a little over $90 million for the area that you see on the map, which is all three of those segments put together. The procurement schedule, which is the next slide, started in March of 2015. We asked for qualifications from each team. We announced a short list in May. We issued an RFP in June, and then we went through an industry review with the different teams and put out a final RFP and received proposals on September 21st of this year. Those proposals were scored, and we announced the proposed contractor, which was on October the 14th at an IFA board meeting. And our goal for closing and giving notice to proceed is January the 12th of 2016. The shortlisted teams were E&B Paving and Primco. They were a joint venture. Milestone Contractors, LP, and then Reith Riley Construction Company were the three teams that gave us proposals when we received them on the 21st of September. The evaluation process, the technical and proposal is scored with two different teams. We have a technical team and a scope proposal team. All evaluators were IFA or NDOT personnel supported by our advisors. Very similar to our P3 procurements that we've done so far on Section 5 and the ORB. These teams are not together. They separately score the technical and the scope proposals. There is no financial proposal here because we have the money. So this is how this design build best value procurement is structured. And then the final step after both teams have scored is to combine the scores, and the winning team would be the team that had the most points out of 100 points available. In the scope proposal score, it represented 60 points out of the 100. We actually, if you look at that map again, the blue area, there were no additional points if you just bid that part of the procurement to the blue area itself. But once the team went past that blue area into the red area and then into the purple area, they got additional points for how much further they could go as far as how many more miles of road we would get for the same $85 million. That part of it was what we call the scope proposal score, and we would add those two together. The technical score represented 40 points, and the technical score was determined by two major elements: the preliminary project management plan, which was 25 points, and then what we call the preliminary design build plan, which is really how do we know we are going to get what we want out of the project. Our both construction and design engineers were very involved with this part of the evaluation, and that was worth 75 points of the technical score. Then we combined those two together and multiplied that by 0.4 to get the technical score that was going to be added together. Again, both those were then put together in the best value determination, and going to the next slide, you'll see that the actual winner was Milestone Contractors. Their original bid on the map shows a little green dot just south of the interchange at State Road 38. The determination was to add to that scope, and that's what that additional almost $6 million was that we added to it, because the ending north of that interchange is a better final or point to stop the construction from an engineering perspective. From a safety perspective, it's much better to do it that way. The highlights from the best proposal value was that, first of all, we designed the pavement to last for 15 years, and we actually got a 19-year pavement. So that was a key point to the procurement itself. And then the other thing that you can see, there's 22 miles of road, and NDOT does, when we get into our preservation of how we treat our roads, we may have one segment that's on a different cycle for a treatment than another. Once we're done with this whole 22 miles, the next time we go to make a preferred treatment on this road from a maintenance standpoint, we'll be able to do it all at the same time, which is critical. It makes it much better for us as far as how we maintain our roads in Indiana on that cycle. Both the project management plan and the public involvement plan were expanded and enhanced, which was very critical to the scoring methods. And in this case, as we all know, MOT is very, very important when we're in construction. And we have a situation here where the contractor really will own the MOT plan, working with NDOT, meaning that most of the pavement on this project will be done at night and not during the day, during the critical times, especially this part of the state, especially I-69 in this area, as far as the traffic itself. So, and then lastly, there was no actual bid on this project, but we do a analysis of what we felt that if we bid all the way up to where this project ended, and then what the actual bid is itself, we showed that we actually got an 18% savings on this bid. So it wasn't, and it's not the low bid here, it's the actual value that we're getting for the road. So if we, so in essence, we're getting about $120 million worth of a road for $90 million. And in a true value involvement here, what we've had here is we've had the private sector come to us and really give us an outstanding bid for what we put together. And that's the beauty behind a best design build best value type of project, very similar to both the ORB and I-69 in our results. Next slide, wanted to add this in just for the future. The governor just announced our Northwest Indiana Major Moves Expansion Project last week, and I just put together an overview for you as to what that project's going to be all about. Our NDOT engineers and our procurement folks have also made the decision that they want to continue with this type of process for this project. This funding is also going to be this will take care of that. The rest of that $70 million out of that $100 million third tranche is going towards this project for expansion for this project up there, and it will also be done as a P3 procurement. Anticipated construction here is also going to be 2 years. We actually just posted the RFQ for this project on our website this week, and we anticipate having a procurement done by probably September or October of this year, and with construction starting in the spring of 17. Other than that, that's the presentation for today. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions, comments? So you're not going to disrupt commute time in right now, just.
Yes.
Thank you. Brian, you want to further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll add only that Section 102 of the Budget Bill authorizes the Budget Committee to review this release of the Major Moves 2020 dollars. And so your review is actually reviewing two transfers to get this to work. One is from the General Fund to the Major Moves 2020 Trust Fund, and then the second transfer from the Trust Fund to the Construction Fund so MTOT can do its work.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience and indulgence. Next, we have Mr. Gent as presenter, IU and iLight. Or iLight, or Gigapop and iLight.
Afternoon. First, I'll start with the Indiana Gigapop project. The Gigapop is a service that provides an aggregation point for the research and education community in Indiana to reach the national and international research network assets. So the Gigapop is connected to the Internet 2 Research Network that serves the broader U.S., the NOAA Research Network, which serves the climate study areas, the Energy Sciences Network, and the list goes on in the amount of research capacity that we can bring in to Indiana. On the provider side then, we connect to iLight, and I'll talk about iLight in a minute, but we also connect directly to the large research universities in Indiana. IU, Purdue, Notre Dame are connected directly to us for the purposes of getting more direct and larger capacity access to these research networks that they need then to compete for national grant opportunities. It is a physical network. We have a location in Chicago. We have 2 locations in Indiana. It provides, again, capacity to iLight and the schools downstream from iLight. I have a map, but it's kind of pointless right now. But any questions about what the Gigapop is? Okay. iLight is the state fiber optic network, and I believe we're going to pass a map around about it. This was started in 1999 as a project to connect IU and Purdue, expanded in 2005 to connect all of the higher schools in Indiana, so public and private schools are all connected today except for 2. It is an opt-in network, so no one's forced to connect to iLight. They do it by choice. We provide direct connectivity to, again, the iLight network, which provides access to the commodity internet and the research networks I've talked about. We support direct services for all the schools. If you're a small school and you have a question or problem on network configurations, capacity, security, you can call the iLight group and we'll come to your school and help you, and that's part of the fees that you pay into the network. This past year, we worked with Earlham and Wabash to win national funding to improve their campus networks. So about $700,000 split nearly equally between the 2 schools to improve the on-campus networking environment. The idea here is that the better campus network you have, the better students you can attract, the better students, the better faculty who will attract more research money to the school. This coming year, we expect to continue that effort. The National Science Foundation is releasing some additional solicitations for awards. We plan and have already been contacted by a number of schools to help them, now that we have 2 examples of what it means to win, to help them do that same thing. The next step for iLight is to really focus on security. Being at a large institution like IU, we see everyday denial of service attacks that we can withstand because we have staff and capacity to understand this. We believe a lot of those smaller schools in Indiana don't, and there are a number of examples nationally where good-sized schools have been put out of business for a day or 2 because of a denial of service attack. And so our next step is to work with each school in Indiana to understand what their security profile is and provide assistance. And some examples of what we've done at Indiana. Again, this will be free and at no additional charge other than what they currently pay today. The big news for iLight is we're currently moving along with a 100 gigabit upgrade for the backbone. On the map you can see there will be upgrades to the entire backbone. All of the rings that you see, the north and south and the ones in central Indiana, will be upgraded to 100 gigabit. We actually exceeded our capacity this summer. This past spring session, when Notre Dame brought on a research collaboration with a group in Chicago. So we started the design and now the build of the 100 gig upgrade. It'll be done sometime in May of 2016, we believe. We have a number of schools already connected at that speed. We'll have more connected at 100 gig, I think, soon. The network upgrade also provides additional capacity to the smaller schools, not clearly ready to move to 100 gigabit, but might want to move from 1 to 10 gigabit. Questions? I'm done.
Okay. Looking at the map on the iLight, I mean, there are some state entities that are hooked in, so
Also able to support the state government, yes.
like DCS and state hospitals, do they pay a fee to you? And so they're making that within their operating budgets locally and deciding whether it's benefit, cost benefit?
Call from IoT and say, what's your price for this circuit to that circuit? And we give them that price, knowing they're comparing us with other providers, and they make a choice or not to use iLight as that provider.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience being here. Next, we have Ms. Davis, Board of Depositories.
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Merce Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Board for Depositories. Diana Merce Davis. I'm the Executive Director for the Indiana Board for Depositories. My report that has been submitted outlines essentially 3 areas for our report. I'm going to explain the collateralization program that the Board for Depositories is using for the benefit of the Public Deposit Insurance Fund. I'll talk a little bit about the status currently of the depositories that are holding public funds, and then finally the status of the Public Insurance Fund. The Board for Depositories began a collateralization program in 2010 to supplement the Public Insurance Fund in the event of a bank failure. The collateralization program essentially uses a tiered system. It's based on a Bank Insight National rating. Each quarter, the depositories' credit ratings are run, and based on their financial rating, they have to collateralize at a 0% level if they're deemed to be very healthy and have a good financial rating. And you can see the matrix there. A 0 to 19 is 100% collateralization level. 20 to 39 represents a collateralization level of 50% on the public funds being held, and a financial rating of 40 and above requires them to collateralize at 0%. Now, my report covers fiscal year 2016, first and second quarter, so that being July to December of 2015. Currently, the number of financial institutions we have had both quarters is 163. First quarter fiscal year 2016 holding $12 billion, and second quarter 2016 holding $13 billion. The credit ratings are doing well, as you can see. In the summary, the average collateral ratings for the first quarter were 58, and the second quarter of 2016 were 57. That would put them at a 0% collateralization level. The status of the depositories for fiscal year 2016 from the first to the second quarter improved. You can see on the chart there, it gives you all of the depositories in each category, as well as their average daily balance, and that's net public funds minus any FDIC coverage, and the total estimated collateral that each would be holding. The first quarter of 2016, we had 13 depositories out of that 163 that were required to collateralize at 50%, In the second quarter of 2016, those numbers improved, and we have only 8 depositories collateralizing at 50%. In the second quarter of 2016, we do have 1 depository that is required to collateralize at 100%. However, that depository does not hold any public funds and is required to report to myself each day, indicating that they don't hold public funds for that day. We have 2 depositories that collateralize at 100% voluntarily. The reason for that is in the statute, at any time, and the board votes on this each year, we can levy assessments on public funds up to 2%. After the fund reached a certain level, the board decided they did not need to levy those assessments anymore. That happened in 1985, and the fund has been healthy since then, and those assessments have not been charged. However, if you are reporting at 100% voluntarily, and we did levy those assessments, you would not be charged the fees. Finally, the public insurance fund reserve amount is healthy at over $300 million. We do have a balance that includes a $35 million receivable from the state of Indiana. A loan was made in 2004 of $50 million. That began, it's a no-interest loan being paid back $5 million a year, which started in 2013. That $5 million has continued to be received, and the balance of that receivable is $35 million. There have been no draws on the fund in the last year, in the last 6 months, excuse me, and the reserves are continuing to gain interest. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience today. Next, we go back to the FSSA Neurodiagnostic Center. Dr. Werner and Mr. Hughey, I believe, are available. A lot of people here today for.
We'll try to be as brief as possible.
Dan, thank you very much, and thank you to your team. Have been excellent partners, and it has been a quickly moving project, but one we're very proud of. Let me first introduce. It is. Is that better? Good enough. I'll speak loudly. I'd like to introduce our team. In addition to our colleagues at IFA, some of our consultants in the room. Crow Horvath, raise your hands. Are here, and John Clips, our technical representative. John's in the back. Thank you for your work. Fagry Baker Daniels was our legal counsel. We have various advocacy groups here showing their support for the hospital, and also the Hospital Association. I think Tim is still here. So thank you all for being here. And mainly I also wanted to introduce our friends from the Community Health Network, who's the clinical partners in this project, and CEO Brian Mills will address you shortly. We'll move through this very quickly in terms of some slides, and these are just some summary slides, but again, the feasibility study was to make the business case not just for the replacement of the old LaRue Carter, which is definitely in need of replacement, but also the fact that we have a substantial patient need across the state. And I think all the committee members are very well aware of the fact that we have a number of Indiana residents that aren't currently receiving services. Much of this dates back to the fact that we have closed 7 state hospitals over the past 40 years, and we don't have the capacity really to meet the need for this population. Currently, we have remaining 6 hospitals with about 800 state hospital beds, and clearly it's time to consider a new model of care. The physical need of the LaRue Carter facility was really brought to the forefront with the land swap we did back in the 90s, moving off of the campus where Eskenazi is out to the Cold Springs Road facility. It is a aging facility built in the 30s as a TB hospital and nursing home, and the cost of renovating that or keeping it current with current medical standards is really cost prohibitive. This gave us a unique opportunity to not only look at other options, but employ a new model of care, particularly integrated care, and co-locating a new facility on an acute care medical campus where we could provide much better medical care as well as psychiatric care. Next slide. So again, the new facility will replace the LaRue Carter Hospital, and the new facility will be called tentatively the Neurodiagnostic Institute and Advanced Treatment Center. Again, that concept of a neurodiagnostic institute, neuro meaning brain, and diagnostic meaning the focus will be on assessing folks earlier in their course of disease. And then the advanced treatment component will be not only the treatment they receive at the hospital, but also the fact we'll be doing warm handoffs as folks move back into their outlying facilities. This will be a state-of-the-art facility with an innovative model of care. I again want to emphasize we're not just closing an old hospital and opening a new, but really moving to a new model of care. And the key component is our partnership with Community Health Network. We'll be able to leverage their medical specialty and primary care services, as well as physical attachment to the emergency department and all the neurodiagnostics and genetic testing that we will need to be state-of-the-art. The next slide really shows the patient impact, the way we're able to serve substantially more patients with a 159-bed hospital is that we will be lowering the length of stay across our hospital system. The average length of stay is about 2 years. At LaRue Carter, it's a little shorter than that. It's almost 10 and a half months, but that's because we have a pretty large children's unit there, and the children turn over a little more quickly. But again, in the new facility, we anticipate a length of stay of 30 to 60 days rather than years, as in our other state hospitals. You can see from this graph that we will be going from serving approximately 150 to 200 at LaRue Carter up to 1,500 patients per year. So we'll substantially increase our capacity for patient care. Next slide is the financial impact, and the important component here is that not only will we be serving more patients, but the average cost impact to the state will go down. Even though this will be a more expensive facility in the not only in the actual maintenance and running, but we'll have more staff there, substantially more primary care and psychiatric staff to meet the needs for this patient population and their increased acuity. But we'll also see a nice increase in revenue. And the main reason for that is that we're getting them earlier in their disease process. Many of the folks that we currently care for now, all their insurance benefits have been burned up or they're not eligible, and they come to our facilities and they've been 100% on the state dime. In this new model, we will be able to take patients, including commercially insured patients, because these services are extremely desirable in the marketplace, and we'll be able to drive a nice increase in revenues that will also offset some of the costs of the facility. That's reflected in this next slide of the impact of the state per patient day. As you can see, the top line, that's Crow's continued, or looking at a continuation of the LaRue Carter Hospital with a projection of cost continuing to rise over the years to come, where the green line indicates that once the new institute is up and running, we'll continue to see a nice decrease in the cost to the state for daily treatment costs for these patients with severe addictions and mental health problems. This is the summary slide of the construction costs and financing plan. The soft and hard costs together reach a grand total of $118 million. It'll be financed in 2 stages. The first stage, $25 million bond for the construction of the connector with the community renovation, and stage 2 will be the long-term bond issuance that will run for 20 years. And the appropriation that the committee put forward last year of $10.9 million, we will be actually well below that on an annual basis. Last couple slides I have here are just some support and endorsements from other agency heads and advocacy groups. I know we're on a tight schedule, so I'll leave that for your reference. And also the last slide gives the link of, in case you would want to share that with others, our documentation on the project and more specifics. But each of you should have in front of you the full financial and feasibility study breakdown, as well as schematics in the back, and a copy of this presentation. And if it's okay with the chair, I'll ask Mr. Mills to make some comments at this point as our clinical partner.
Thanks, Dr. Warner. I'm thrilled to be here today and have you all consider us being your partner in this really, that wasn't good, innovative and game-changing way to treat patients. I don't know everybody in the room, but just a little background. I'm the president and CEO of Community Health Network. I've been at Community over 30 years. The reason that's important is because I fully believe in our mission. And our mission is to enhance the health and well-being of the communities we serve, and that's what we do. We earlier this year, I made an announcement that I was going to invest, our board was going to invest $175 million on that East Campus. And the reason that's relevant is that it's long been said we were going to leave that campus. And we could have. We looked at other options, but that's the community, that's where community started. So we made that investment. Behavioral care is a big deal to us. We're by far the largest behavioral care provider in the state. Inpatient, outpatient, partial, residential, any way you cut, slice, and dice it, we're the largest provider. Most people have gotten out of this business. It's not a highly profitable business, we know that, but it gets back to our mission. And that's what this is all about. When we were having trouble with access for additional psychiatrists because of the lack of residencies in the state, we started one. Our residency program will start this July, and I'm glad to say that as the Julys go forward, we'll have 16 residents in total each year, four per class per year. So when you look at what we're trying to do in behavioral care, when the state came to us with this idea, this just adds the additional component to be able to provide comprehensive care and to make sure that we do that in a way which is we're trying to address the issues that people have and the behavioral care, the drug addictions, we're very, very versed in that. But this will give us a way to look at the totality of it and still deal with the most vulnerable, and to do that in a means where you combine both the behavioral care and the medical providers. Behavioral care is kind of set aside. That's how it's always been in your facility and even in our psychiatric hospital facility that we will keep open. So I'm glad to address any questions you have about our organization, why this is important to us, why the location makes sense. But I can tell you this fits within our mission and fits within the responsibility that we have to the citizens of Central Indiana. Thanks.
Representative Gooden.
And I want to say thank you for being a partner. And I want to say thank you, Dr. Warner, as well. This has been a long time in coming, and this is a great first step. Look forward to being able to work with you folks as we move forward, and with the governor's drug task force group. This is going to be, we're going to lean on you heavily, I guess, is where I'm going with this. So I think we're finally realizing in the state, I think as we've pulled our heads out of the sand and realized that we have a problem. And we've also realized that we just can't put everybody in jail that has this mental illness of addiction. And this is a great first start to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am encouraged about the path we're taking down. You mentioned that, you have the ability in the Neurodiagnostic Institute to do private pay as well as Medicaid and kind of the no pay, the state supported patients. Do you anticipate, or I guess I'm trying to think of the future and maybe where the demand grows and the demand grows, are state or non-insured patients ever going to be crowded out because of the insured patients? Or hopefully we hope as ACA continues to evolve that everybody's insured, right?
Dr. Brown, great question. The reality is we're right there with the community. They are the state's largest private, say not state, mental health provider. And obviously there's going to be tremendous synergies there as well. So our first commitment is always to the state patients. Those that have traditionally been our patients will get top priority because they really won't be able to go anyplace else. So it's not only the more clinically challenged patients, but are those that don't fit into community or other hospital systems, mental health networks. The other issue is how we work with our partners in the community mental health centers. We're trying to develop a seamless continuum of care. Obviously, their world's going to change a bit because right now, the only way to get into one of our state hospitals is if you're on commitment. And we'll need to be looking at statutory changes to allow voluntary patients, basically, and those that are insured to have the option of coming to this institute. But again, this isn't a long-term stay hospital. We'll have other facilities that can handle patients that need that level of care. This is more for the acute end, and as you see schematically, will actually feed and support the rest of the hospitals in the system.
And Mr. Mills, I guess I heard you say you're still going to have psychiatric beds available on your side of the institution.
We have psychiatric beds on our north campus. We operate about 125 beds a day. They're filled most days. We also have a small unit in Kokomo at our Howard Regional facility. So we don't not see any reason to reduce that. I'd love it if we all of a sudden came up with ways in which we can treat this as outpatients or something other than within a hospital stay. But even there, I can remember when we started, opened the facility at North, which would have been in the fall of 1985, you know, a stay was 60 to 90 days there. You know, I'm not saying that we've corrected the issue, but the stays are in the, you know, the 10 to 20 days, followed up with all kinds of other aggressive therapies. And so I'm optimistic that we can do more things.
Any further questions or comments? Senator Talion.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to go over this with me earlier so that I had a lot of questions that have been answered, especially about the status of the current building and what we're doing with that. I was still a little concerned that we're building a new hospital that doesn't have any additional long-term beds, and that we may be shifting people out of the diagnostic center to state hospitals when we don't have enough beds in the current ones. But I think this is a really great program and want to support it.
If I might, Mr. Chair, just one last comment. The letter of intent and term sheet has been signed between the state and the Community Health Network. So we have that deal inked, and that was kind of the last remaining step from a legal standpoint.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Senator Kinley.
I'd be remiss, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be remiss if I don't recognize individually the effort that Dr. Warner and Dan Hughey have put together on behalf of the state, and then, of course, in constructing this partnership with the community, which I think the benefit of that is that you have somebody who's in the business who's going to be there for the long term that can help the state stay on course when you make this kind of a commitment. And everybody's just come together with a tremendous level of cooperation. They had kind of an announcement ceremony with the governor yesterday out there, and I got a chance to go out there. There were a lot of people representing this different elements of this whole issue in a lot of different directions, and I think everybody was pretty solidly behind it. And probably need to recognize Brian Bailey and the budget agency for how they kind of helped put this together too. I think it came together a lot better, quicker than we ever anticipated.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Medicaid plan amendments. The second row gets to move forward. Floor is yours.
I have two, or had two, state plan amendments to present to you today. However, the first state plan amendment, we were told by CMS last week is not necessary, and so we will not actually need to submit that to the federal government for approval. We apparently already have the authority to do that under the current state plan. But essentially, that plan amendment would have, and now we will go forward with adding co-payments to Hoosier Care Connect, the managed care program for the aged, blind, and disabled that I talked about earlier today. And those co-payments will match what similar individuals are required to pay for certain services in fee-for-service. So unless the committee has any questions about that, I'll move to the second one. Okay. The second state plan amendment regards our addition of ABA therapy to the Medicaid state plan. I talked about this a little bit earlier in my Medicaid forecast presentation. Applied behavioral analysis is an evidence-based clinical practice for adolescents with autism. It is covered in some other state Medicaid programs. It is required to be covered in commercial insurance in Indiana under the autism mandate. And under federal guidance that we received over the summer last year, states are now required to add this as a benefit in all state Medicaid programs. We have taken the steps to craft a rule that we think will help to target children who are most appropriate to receive that care through medical necessity. That rule is progressing through the rulemaking process. In addition to that, we will be submitting the state plan amendment in January with the hopes that the implementation date for this service would go into place on January 1st. There is a budgetary impact. Right now, our best estimate is about $30 million a year, combined state and federal spending on this benefit, of which about 10 million would be state dollars. So I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
So commercial insurance under our autism mandate that the state legislature passed has been covering these services, and again, guidance, other Medicaid states, other Medicaid plans have this. So basically they said if your commercial side does it and Medicaid does it, you got to do it too.
Yes, we actually looked at those policies that the commercial insurers and the other state Medicaid programs have in place. We looked at case law of some lawsuits from other states. We looked at the federal guidance and the clinical guidelines from the professional societies that in psychology and adolescent health and the applied behavioral providers themselves in analyzing who is most likely to be receive the most benefit from these types of services, and then try to craft a policy that matched those criteria.
Okay. How often does CMS come out with guidance on different policies and changing policies? Is it frequent? Is it?
It is very frequent. There is a whole level of regulatory guidance that they can issue, and sub-regulatory guidance that doesn't have the effect of changing statute that is required to do by Congress. I would say, you know, we get probably about a half dozen regulations a year, probably about 6 or 8 informational bulletins, which are sub-regulatory guidance. This particular mandate was in an informational bulletin from the director of the federal Medicaid program. And there are informal phone calls and emails that happen between us and the agency as well. So quite a bit.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you very much. That concludes our review items. At this time, are there any motions to remove any items from the agenda? Is there, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Second, been moved. Okay, been moved and seconded. Discussion, comment?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to point out with regard to the revenue forecast, the $39 million that it looks like we're going to be down might well be made up by the extra money that we're raising from the tax amnesty program. Despite the fact that the IEDC is trying to spend that money without authorization, it looks like that money might plug a hole. So I just wanted to say that I'm not sure how we're getting this IEDC thing without reopening the budget, which I can't imagine that anybody in this room wants to do, but thank you.
Director Bailey.
Just to make one clarification, the forecast is being reduced by 39.9 million, but because of post-April 2015 acts from the General Assembly that impacted revenue, we're actually going to see more in revenue in fiscal 16 by about 5 million than what we had anticipated after session ended. So we're not losing 40 million because we're going to be experiencing less sales tax revenue, although we will be. It's going to be made up by individual income tax. What's going on here in the forecast is that we're including the cost of the outside acts post-session into the forecast now. We had already, when the session ended and we tallied the cost of the outside acts, we were already planning for an impact of $45.7 million. Now we're being shown that the impact is going to be 39.9 on the bottom line. Just wanted to make that clarification.
And does Budget Agency have a financial statement that they'll be sharing with committee members today or tomorrow?
Yes, we have that now, and would be happy to distribute that to the committee.
Yeah, I think as soon as practical, that might make a little bit of clarification of how it translates down to the bottom line. I would also maybe, Senator Talion, as a comment related to that, is that, you know, I think we've all had discussion and talked about road funding being a priority in our needs throughout the state of Indiana. And I think we all have looked at, you know, how much cushion for a recession is needed, because I think we're all worried that we've gone beyond the average length of a recovery. So we're all trying to forecast and put our bets on when the next recession's happening. But I think people are looking at some of those reserves to be used for road funding. So any time something translates to a reserve, it's available to be spent on asphalt. So it has been moved and seconded to formally adopt the approved agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. We are adjourned. I guess from a housekeeping, we don't have anything scheduled, but I think either in session when there's a free day or just right after session, we may have another meeting, but we'll try and communicate that with plenty of time. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.